This is a funny thing to start with a bell because we're going to class, but we're talking about what you always did after class.
And what you wanted to do during class.
Exactly.
Welcome, everyone, to Historically High, the show that most of you are probably familiar with. But for those of you that are joining us for the first time, both myself, Chris, over here we got Professor Adam.
Hello.
Take you on a journey through pretty much any and all aspects of history that kind of just come into our heads. It could be recent, it could be ancient, it could be civilizations, it could be businesses. And we get to talk about something near and dear to both our hearts. Not just our hearts, but our entire generation's hearts.
We literally put our blood, sweat, and tears into this.
The business of the console wars, first between like Nintendo and Sony, and then afterward, as you can probably tell by the title, this is going to be a two-parter. We're going to try something a little different this time because, maybe people don't want to listen to video games for 2 weeks in a row. We're actually going to split them up. We're going to have round one between Sony and Nintendo. Round two is going to take place primarily between PlayStation, Xbox, maybe a third horse in that race as well. The old guard, essentially, is still in the fight. But man, this was just nostalgia overload.
We lived this. This was our childhoods,
not just
early adulthoods, teenage years.
Ate it, drank it, slept it, breathed it.
Yeah, and I think both of us being younger siblings, there was a little bit of influence that came from the top.
My sister was never into video games.
Really?
Yeah, but I mean, like if I was interested in it, I think she would actually kind of feign interest in it to try to go ahead and increase the likelihood of having the parents get the system if they thought it was going to be for both kids.
Yeah, she was on the team.
Yeah,
you're a team kid.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to my brother today just kind of about how we became a Nintendo family. And he just laid it out step by step of Nintendo having the library. And when he told me about this, I had completely forgotten about it, but I have these vague memories of being a kid. Because when you rented video games back then, we had an Albertsons that rented the video games. Like a grocery store where you would go check out, and then it would be a whole separate section.
It was right next to like the customer service where you could buy cigarettes and everything.
And the photo.
And then they would have the little, yeah. I'm well aware.
He said that was how he made his decision, was he could choose a Sega or he could choose he had a Nintendo first.
They were small too. These were not big, and they were happened to be both games and movies.
Yeah.
So your selection was rather limited.
So he lived through Nintendo. When it came time for Super Nintendo or Genesis, he said that he walked over into the section and saw just how many more Super Nintendo games were out than Sega games. He's like, Super Nintendo. And that just kind of started our family on this path of being Nintendo people up until I think Nintendo. I'm not even going to. I have a tough time with Nintendo because I want to badmouth them all the time, but I realize that it's just not for me. And people love Nintendo, but as I grew out of my childhood and into my adolescence, PlayStation was right there. And PlayStation was a higher system in as far as like maturity level almost.
Well, and here's the thing too. It was... Most people had a Nintendo, I think. You had people that had Segas. My best friend growing up across the street, I had Nintendo and SNES. He had the Genesis. And you always kind of want what you don't have because you get bored of your own shit. And he had certain games that the Super Nintendo didn't have. But it was cool to be able to also like experience that kind of side to side fucking sleepovers, man. We'd have both consoles out and just be swapping out the cable adapter in the back when we wanted to play something else.
Pull a TV out of another room and put it in there too.
What was so fun about doing the research for this one though, is that as a kid, you got no clue what's going on behind the scenes of these companies, what it takes for them to actually get a product to market. The other thing too is trying to see adults figure out what's going to appeal to children and everything. And then the just underhandedness, especially during this first round of the console wars, it was because the market was small. It was a small community of people that were developing these systems and games. So there was so much crossover and butting heads and having enemies and shit like that.
It was like back then a more equitable market share meant that you were going to make money.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you can have a 16% market share, and as long as your software numbers are doing well, you can still make a hell of a lot of money.
Yeah.
Back then, if you weren't 40% of the market share, you probably weren't making a ton of money on what you did.
You can afford to be niche now because there's so many cheaper ways to make something. Back then, it was you wanted the lion's share, and you needed the lion's share, essentially.
Well, we'll talk about software and hardware and just kind of what actually makes money and what just is an endless pit to throw into. But at the same time, like, that wasn't the idea back then, because everything was, there was no such thing as a download.
Yeah.
Like, you had to have physical copies of everything in their hands. And nowadays you just don't. And if you can cut out that middleman, you can make a bunch more money not having to send something else out.
That's what I love too, is we were alive throughout the entire progression of it. And until kind of we put this stuff in front of us and stop and think about it, it's almost kind of weird to think, oh yeah, discs. You were just telling me, like, you were asking me, you're like, does your Series S have a disc thing? And I was like, yeah, it has a disc thing. And you're like, my PS4 has a disc thing. And I was like, but I've never bought a game I've never gone into GameStop and bought anything like that. I just download everything.
Yeah, I might have bought one disc for my PS5, but that's it. Like, everything else, it's just so much easier to go download it. Like, it takes all of the steps out. All of the waiting time if you order it online, gone.
Yeah.
If you have to drive to a store to pick it up, it's the most convenient thing in the world. But to me, it blows my mind that we've come this far. Like, just talking at the end when we're going to talk about numbers of what the video game market was in 2000 even compared to now, it's just like 15x.
The culture is insane. Well, wherever you guys listen to your podcast, please give us the top rating on that, 5 stars most of the time. Keep sending in the feedback in the comments. We love getting those. You got anything?
If I did, I forgot it.
All right.
Which is a good start.
Strap yourselves in for the nostalgia-fueled session of Console Wars. All right. It starts with Pong, right? I mean, kind of as far as what anyone can think of when they think back to the earliest video game, it's Pong.
And there might have been some stuff kind of similar to it around that time. First and second generation of video gaming, I get it when you come from nothing and that's what you have. It has to be super awesome. Like, thinking about Atari and what was it, the Commodore?
There was the Commodore. There was like a ColecoVision or something like that.
That at the time is also cutting edge. I don't want to be elitist here and say, hey, you guys didn't get anything good, but they just didn't. They got
something
time wasters
they'd never seen before.
Yeah. And then just continuing to move through that, you come into this generation of Nintendo that started, I wouldn't say maybe as far away from video games as possible, but they started with just the most analog game there is. It's just cards.
Yeah, I was going to say it had the game in it.
Uh-huh.
So Nintendo starts as a playing card company, originally custom, like drawn playing cards. And it was in an area that was like heavily controlled by the Yakuza. And there was a ton of like gambling dens and all this kind of stuff. And they were just snatching up these playing cards because every time they're gambling, they're using fresh decks to make sure people aren't evil. Yeah. So all of a sudden, this guy is bringing in, tons of orders of playing cards and kind of decides, hey, I can't just be, the playing card king of wherever it is I'm at. But sorry, I got to laugh at that.
Yeah.
But I want to start trying to kind of diversify. And this actually comes off of a meeting with Disney. Because he's like, what can I put on these cards that are going to make people buy a shit ton of them? It's like, hey, people love Mickey Mouse. So he actually goes to Disney and is like, hey, can you give us the rights to your characters so we can put them on these playing cards? Disney's like, okay, who are you? And he's like, we're Nintendo. We're a family, a family-run business. We've been in business for, I can't remember at that point, it's like 50 years or something like that.
It was pre-1900s, I want to say, when they started.
So I think it was 70 years when they went to Disney. And they're like, yeah, we're like, our characters that's the lifeblood. That's what our business is. Nah, we're not going to do that. But it gave him,
dropped an atomic bomb on us. And then
yeah.
afterwards we fell in love with your shit and there's no recompense here. You're not going to be like, yeah, you can sign these off on my cards. Come on.
Yeah. So long story short, through a series of like just trying to branch out to grasp onto any type of business, that'd be a venture capitalist, right? Just someone just trying to grab anything that they can possibly. They end up creating a successful toy by one of their employees that's basically sounded like a damn grabber.
Yeah, it's like a gopher.
Like
almost.
a gopher, the stick that you just pull the trigger and it grabs something for you. After that, they had a series of poor investments, one of them being a chain of motels in which you rent by the hour because high-powered Japanese businessmen don't have a lot of time to get down to business, so you don't need to, and plus most of them probably being married, you need somewhere away from home that you're going to be doing that stuff.
I thought it was just if you didn't want to catch the train home and you needed a couple hours before you went back to the office.
Didn't.
You think it was you were accompanied into these hourly hotels?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, they had a venture into cotton candy machines. A Nintendo branded cotton candy machine sounds, I wouldn't say as far off as it should nowadays, because it seems like Nintendo slaps their name on a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. But all of these different ventures just kept not panning out. And all of the money that this family had amassed, this fortune that they had made in these playing cards, because it's not like they were a fledgling company. They were doing pretty well for themselves. But
they had an office building in like Kyoto or something like that, Kyoto.
Every single time one of these failed ventures happens, it's just another scoop out of that bucket.
Yeah.
And eventually you run into a situation where, do you remember who the company was?
It was Mitsubishi.
Yes.
Had developed a video game, a home game console. Now, up to this point, over in the United States, arcades are starting to become a thing, becoming super popular at this point, but all video games are going to be in a big cabinet like you see in arcades.
I think they had Ataris.
Did they have Ataris over there? So that was the only home game console. So Mitsubishi comes to the guy running Nintendo. His name was not Nintendo. I don't remember what his last name was. And it's like, hey, we were actually designing this home game console for a company.
Was it Nakayama?
Nope, that was the guy that during the first console wars that's just shooting down all the ideas. Okay. We made this for a company. That company is now bankrupt. You guys can get in on the, you're already a playing card company, all that. You made a toy that was really popular. This is kind of a kid's toy. You can get into the video game industry on the cheap by doing this. This is already developed and we can mass produce these things. And the owner of Nintendo at the time, it was like too good of an offer to pass up. Yeah, I'll go ahead and take it.
Yeah, and it was that quick that they jumped into this market that saw an insane growth. And then it's almost like that growth was so unchecked that everything just crashed. Mm-hmm. You hear about a stock market crash. You don't hear about a game. Well, I guess you hear like card industry crashes and things like that. But to think that there was a video game crash in 1983 where the market just fell out because it was so oversaturated with so many different consoles and games.
But they were all bad.
Yeah.
You lost interest really easily. I think one of the nail in the coffin games that they mentioned was like a horribly done E.T. game that Atari had actually done. And it was so it's E.T.
Yeah.
It's an insanely popular movie. Everyone's getting that game for their Atari. Game was horrible. And in that situation, that starts to turn everybody off on this whole, it's like home video games had their shot. It's done at this point. It's as far as it could go.
Instead of getting candy bar sick, you just have a bag of sugar that you're eating. Mm-hmm. Like we've completely ruined our stomachs on this. Nintendo kind of unfazed because this crash happens in 1983. Oh yeah. So the peak at this time in 1983, the peak of the market, $3.2 billion market in 1983. By 1985, it was around 100 million. That's how bad this crash was. You went from talking about 3.2 billion to 100 million in 2 years.
That's the whole video game industry, including cabinet games, all that kind of stuff.
Just absolutely gutted. Just terrible. But in 1983, at the beginning of this crash, this Famicom system shows up in Japan, and this is Nintendo's first system. It'll end up getting its facelift to come over here as the NES, the Nintendo Entertainment System.
It's called the Famicom when they released it, and then it'll become the Super Famicom when they release that one.
Yeah, so they released this in this turbulent time, and the big hit's going to be Mario, but it's not the first thing that they do because you have to establish a legend for Mario. Nintendo goes to the arcade market and they build this game that they put out in a cabinet that goes into an arcade called Donkey Kong. Everybody's trying to figure out why Donkey Kong is so cool because he has this weird, goofy, mustachioed, odd-looking man that's trying to rescue his girlfriend from this giant ape that's throwing barrels at him.
And they sent this over they had established an American division, Nintendo of America, and they send over, it's a cabinet that they send over. They get it, they open it up, and they're looking at it, they're like, the fuck is a Donkey Kong? Like, it's a giant, and they power it up, and they see the game, they're like, this thing's not gonna, like, the American audience isn't gonna be interested in this. The thing just blows the fuck up. Insanely well received. All of a sudden, Nintendo's like, that's going to be, it's that guy. It's not going to be that game that's going to be the flagship, but it's going to include that guy, the hero.
Well, we named the first game after the villain. Mm-hmm. Everybody fell in love with the hero. Who's the hero? A guy named Mario. You and I talked about this a little bit during study time. Mario was created out of what a Japanese man sitting in the middle of Tokyo or Kyoto thought an Italian plumber would look like.
Imagine what an Italian plumber would look like. And also, someone had to prove how he sounded. He sounded like this.
Yeah. Which we also found out the voice actor is a guy that was born in like San Jose.
Which, I mean, God, how many minds did that shape as that's what an Italian accent sounded like?
Yeah, true. You really got to, do you fly out to Italy and you're just looking around and you hear the one loud guy at the bar, you're like, you.
Yeah.
What's your job? You're a plumber? Okay, Mario's going to be a plumber.
Oh, I thought it was going to be a New York plumber. I thought he was thinking like even that deep. Oh, I think that? I think that because that's what the Mario Brothers movie had.
John Leguizamo and
Bob Hoskins.
Yes. Yeah. Movie gets a lot of hate. I didn't hate it as a kid.
No, as a kid, but you go back and it's not rewatchable.
King Koopa is not the same kind of scary individual he was back then.
Nope. So, everyone just wanted the boots.
Yes.
Those jet boots.
Right.
Yeah.
So back into this, Mario hits with the NES when it gets to America, in North America, and just blows up.
Goes through, I think they said that they sent it over and it went to 2. At this point, you have the, what do they call the expos? There was not E3. E3 is a thing that was created, and we'll talk about that here, just based on the video game industry. This was the Consumer Electronics Show at CES. Yes. So the Consumer Electronics Show, it goes for 2 years, and each year, everyone's looking at Nintendo and being like, did you not get the memo about the crash over here? People are not interested in video games. They go back to, Nintendo headquarters, whatever, and they tell them, they're like, hey, the American market's not interested in these. Like, bullshit. They're not interested in bad games. They haven't been thrown off of video games. It's just the bad games. Let's go ahead and keep pushing this. As soon as what we're going to go ahead and do, take this and launch it in one city. That's what we're going to go ahead and do. As a testing ground and as proof of concept, we're going to go ahead and launch this thing in one city. Everyone's going to see how popular it is, and then it'll blow up from there. So Nintendo of America is like kind of only one option for this. We're going to New York, and we're going to try to get this thing. We're going to advertise, and we're going to try to get this thing in all of these like different toy stores to where kids can come in that are already going to be there, and they can actually test this thing out. The retailers that we want to get into will actually see that kids will buy this thing from their retailer. It's going to serve multiple purposes. From the moment this thing gets into New York and these kids get their hands on it, never seeing anything like this before, it's a fucking craze.
hey, that guy's an Italian plumber like my uncle. Yeah, all it takes is that proof of concept to go back in. I don't remember if they went back to the next consumer show, but they just said, look at these sales that we've done in New York.
Mm-hmm.
If that's just what we've done in New York, imagine across the rest of the country.
Yeah, and word's going to spread, of course. What's going to happen if there's a craze in New York? All of the major news networks are there. They're going to be like, craze is sweeping New York. It's video games.
Yeah. We get to 1986, and that's just kind of the catch up on Nintendo, how the NES got into markets, why it blew up, why it was the king. At one point in time, I saw two different numbers for this. At one point in time, right around this, Nintendo had like between 90 and 95% of the market share. So almost literally the total market is Nintendo.
Yep.
And this is after, I know Atari kept kind of trying to fight their way through, but after the blow up happened, after the downturn happened, Atari just ate shit. So they might have had 1 or 2% of the remaining 5. They
lasted so much longer than I thought because the Jaguar was like their last thing that they put out. But yeah, they were around for a lot longer than I thought. But yeah, Nintendo rules the root. There's no challengers at this point. Can you think of any company that would ever have a 90% market share? If you were the first to do something, you would maybe have that for 6 months before everybody else was right behind you trying to do the same thing.
Especially, everybody knows that these things can be made now. Like, there's no proprietary way to make this thing. You can make a machine.
Yeah, I think the thought process too is, okay, this was already kind of iffy to begin with, and now Nintendo's already established themselves in that market. So we're not only taking the risk that a video game system is going to be profitable, but we're going to be coming into a market where they're the Kleenex at this point of tissues.
Yeah.
If someone says a video game, people think you're talking about Nintendo.
Well, at that point in time, again, I'm just generalizing, but if you're looking at the toy market for children, it probably beyond like bikes and sports equipment and stuff like that, a children's toy probably maxed out at what, $50, $100 max that you're going to be spending on just one toy for a child. And these things come out at higher prices. This shocked me so much to know what these list prices were, even back then. Because now, if you look at phones, you used to be able to get like a BlackBerry Pearl. Oh my God, that was old. A BlackBerry Pearl.
Blueberries are expensive right now.
We're talking about like $250 for a phone. That was just what you paid to get it. And nowadays, if you can find a phone for under $1,000, you're doing pretty well, right?
That actually does the stuff you want it to do. Yeah, definitely. That's one thing too, looking at that. So Nintendo Entertainment System, original OG Nintendo, launches in Japan in July of 83. 2 years later is when it finally launches in 85 October or October of 85 in the US.
$179 list price.
It was $199 at the very start.
Oh, okay, so this was after the drop.
Yeah, it was even more expensive at that point, but $199 for something unproven. But again, how many times have we seen, I guess I've probably kind of lost touch with it, but how many different holiday crazes of the big ticket items do you think we've been through? I've seen Tickle Me Elmo, Beanie Babies, Furbies, Tamagotchis, Nintendo at that point. Because again, it launching doesn't mean that that's when it's selling. That just means when it arrived in the United States. So it's still a little bit of time before it actually, like I was saying, picks up steam and all of a sudden it's the go-to toy. After this big New York demo and everything, they're going to need to be shipping these things all over the country. And as a parent, you're looking at that, and I say that because, I'll spend the money on an Xbox for myself, but I'll be like, hey, he's now old enough to start playing.
Yeah.
And that's a completely fucking different. I'll save that for round 2 when we're talking about Xbox and all that kind of stuff. But I created a fucking monster. I'm regretting it, but I'm so proud at the same time. But back to the Nintendo Entertainment System. Essentially, it ends up selling 61.9 million consoles over its lifetime.
That's so many, but if that's 95% of the market share, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, if someone has a video game in their house, it's a Nintendo, and if they say they have a video game in their house and you walk in, it's not that, you're like, the fuck is that?
Yeah, and there's a lot of this stuff. I'm just going to come out in the open and say this right now. I'm not going to be Pokemon heavy this episode because I somehow have missed every single iteration of Pokemon coming back around. Zelda, I have a ton of respect for it. I know that it's like a storied franchise. I haven't even played 5 minutes of Zelda.
Buddy, I'm right there with you. I think I played Pokemon a little bit when I was maybe on a road trip because it was something to do on the Game Boy. And then after that, not really existent. I was never one of those people that got into Zelda regardless. I love fucking RPGs are my thing, but I never got into that.
Tremendous respect for these brands.
Yes.
I have zero knowledge of them.
But again, that's the thing is there's, at this point, your kid in a candy store, there's so many different.
Yeah. Super Mario Brothers, Zelda, Metroid, Mega Man, all of these titles that have continued on into current day, all launched on the NES. You had Rampart, which was one of my personal favorites. Duck Hunt, everybody loved. Superstar Pro Wrestling, again for me. WWF King of the Ring, again for me, were two very pivotal first time getting to play a wrestling game on a device.
Again, this is 8-bit wrestling.
Yeah, and it was awful.
But it was the greatest thing you had ever seen. You were controlling. Wait, was it licensed as far as actual wrestlers?
Oh, yeah.
So you got to fulfill. Oh, my God. You were just erect the entire time.
It was so much fun. I remember playing Duck Hunt. And
I had the.
Yeah. But.
Womp, 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 and the dog would duck out of the grass and he would have it in his mouth or he would be upset if you missed.
For me, I don't know about for you playing it, but my young youth, I was maybe 5 feet away from the screen.
Are you talking about when you had it touched? Are you talking about when you would touch it against the screen and try to follow?
No. I got close. I mean, I was probably a foot away.
Yeah.
But then as I grew up and kept playing it more and more and more, you start taking steps back to see how good you can
challenge
get.
Yourself.
And then you just realize that there's a point where the range just is never going to pick up. So then you start moving forward again.
So I had a cord. That's as far as you're supposed to. Again, everything's corded at this point. I know we're fucking spoiled now, but this is corded. So this thing, I mean, it's got no challenges.
No. Until 1986.
So people can't be like, it's inferior to this because it's the only thing out there. All of a sudden, if something is showing to be this successful, you're going to have people that are going to try to throw their hat in the ring to try to challenge you. They're not expecting to completely dethrone you, but if they can get their foot in that huge market that's starting to open back up, even having a 20%, 30% market share is going to go ahead and be big bucks.
Especially if you have a background in games that you can pull from, like being an arcade distributor. And when we start talking about Sega, we're talking about a company who always has felt Japanese, but somehow was started by two Americans in Hawaii selling service games.
Service games is what it's short for.
And it was literally like pinball games, different things like that they would sell to the service members in Hawaii. Mm-hmm. They also cut a deal with a pachinko distributor back in Japan.
Yeah.
And kind of grew this empire into the arcades.
This is during a time when Reconstruction is happening as well, the formation of this, where Japan is now going to be receiving some stuff coming over now that trade is open back up. They're going to be pulling in these American things, and one of the things that gets brought over is it pinball that gets brought over?
I think it was.
And then it gets manufactured there, and then there's just this trade. So Sega ends up creating a company in Japan and then ends up having Sega of America. So we're going to be referring to Sega of Japan and Sega of America. They operate under the same banner, but they do kind of operate as separate entities.
Yeah. Yep. There's an overall CEO and then there's Sega of America CEOs. Mm-hmm. But Sega gets its foot in the door of arcade gaming, just kind of the general progression of how it goes. And Sega becomes massive in the arcade space. They're building cabinets left and right. They're developing all of these different arcade games. And then they take it a step further and start buying arcades. So there's a good chance. This is another weird thing where now that we're talking about this, I just realized that I haven't seen an arcade in forever. So there's probably a generation close.
Dave and Buster's.
That's adults though, like a kid's arcade.
Buddy, they were only for kids because adults had no interest in video games. Had adult. Okay.
You
When
remember
you go-
Tilt in the mall?
Yes, I remember Tilt. in the
Yeah,
mall.
that's what I'm saying. You don't see those anymore.
Okay, but at the same time, it's because they've just now combined those into things where people can now get food at that place or people can do other things. I still, anytime me and my kid go to, a place that has video games and things like that, you don't see cabinet video games real anymore. Oh, Chuck E. Cheese still has cabinet video games.
Really?
But even then, I'm playing those, and it's because I grew up playing video games. You can't introduce this kiddie kind of technical contraption thing to somebody who's in their 30s at this point and have them be interested in it unless they're interested in computers or they're interested, they have those niche interests. Kids fucking love this shit.
So if you're Sega and you're buying into these arcades, you're filling your arcades with your games. It's a lot of vertical integration that Sega's doing.
It's the natural progression. What do we have to do to make more money off these people? Well, they have to come into the arcades in order to pump the quarters in the machines. What if we brought the arcade to them? Nintendo is already doing it. We know that there's a market for it. With video games, and it's going to be the trend throughout the entire course of gaming. A console is only as good as its games. It doesn't matter if the console itself is light years ahead of everything else. If the games suck and they're not there or there's not a wide selection, people will take an inferior product that has better games. Yeah. And so with Sega, kind of the initial challenge is, because Nintendo's already been doing this, any of those early game developing studios, they're out there making Frogger and that kind of stuff.
Namco, Konami. Yep. Also people that are arcades too.
Yes.
That are in arcade games. So if Sega pisses them off, they might not get the rub when it comes time for a home console.
And Nintendo has already cozied up to all of these. So Sega being a little later to the game, just for kind of a reference in time, 85 is when the Nintendo's in the United States picks up within the year, whatnot. The Sega Genesis comes online in the United States August of 89. Now, it's touted as essentially the next generation of gaming. Because
I thought Oh, no. Okay. So I actually went back a little further than the Genesis. The Sega Master System.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Was 86, facing off against NES. Not that big of a deal. It was a remodel of something they had in Japan called the SG-1000.
I guess that's why you don't hear about it, because it wasn't making a dent.
Yeah. The Master System 2 drops in 1990, and that is what becomes Genesis.
Okay. So Genesis ends up launching, and the deal with Genesis is 8-bit Nintendo Entertainment System. Oh shit. We just doubled that. We got double the bits. We're 16-bit, better graphics. And because the graphics are better, you're going to enjoy playing the games more.
Well, Sega figured out something I think that Nintendo didn't quite figure out, because with the Master System, with the NES, we talked about it, 61.9 million consoles over its lifetime. Master System sold 10 to 13 million from 86 to 92. But the games that it comes out with, Alf, branded. Buster Douglas Boxing, branded. Something called Chuck Rock, I don't know what the fuck that was, I just threw it in there because it sounded funny. FIFA, branded. They're going out to these places in American culture, and I guess world culture with FIFA, and they're seeing these brands that they're coming out with these games for, and it becomes something that's recognizable to the American public, because they're not just these games that are being loved over in Japan. It's kind of Sega of America is bringing the American palette to games.
So it did come out in 89. So it does show it was launched in North America, but again, because it's not really super visible.
The Genesis?
The previous, yeah.
Yeah.
But this actually marks that Genesis does what Nintendo don't campaign.
Okay.
And that's how they're marketing it, because again, they're a more advanced system. So Genesis isn't, despite the fact that it has this technological advantage, it's not really doing much. They need someone that can actually, it's going to be nothing without the right marketing. If you can't get it in front of people and decide how to essentially appeal to this base you're trying to sell it to, you're dead in the water. So who do you tap? You're going to go ahead and tap a man named Tom Kalinske. And Tom Kalinske is a legend as far as I'm concerned. We'll go ahead and let's break down the resume here. Tom Kalinske, when he is still, I think, in college, he actually helped make Flintstone Vitamins. He was one of the ones that determined that, hey, how are we going to get kids to take more vitamins? I don't know, kids love fucking cartoon characters, just shape them like cartoon characters. Everybody took Flintstone Vitamins. Also, if you did take Flintstone Vitamins, there's no shame in saying it. Probably make sure you're doing your stretches in the morning and everything like that. Foam roller for your back at night. Take care of yourself. You still got a long road ahead, but still maintenance.
I ate those things. I ate Flintstone mints. I didn't realize that Tom was the reason that I ate Flintstone mints.
Mm-hmm. Wait, mints? Vitamins?
Vitamins, mints, whatever. Okay, hand up. I ate those things like mints.
Okay, that's fine.
I had more than my intake.
I'm not going to lie to you. Vitamins. You would probably need technically about 5 of those things to get any meaningful dosage of vitamins, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, Mattel taps him. They're like, we want you to come in, revitalize Barbie. He ends up bringing Barbie back. He's the one that launches that campaign or that portion of like Barbie when all of a sudden Barbie can be anything she wants to be. You got fucking spacesuit Barbie. You have marine biologist Barbie. You have, I work down at the corner diner trying to raise 2 kids. I'm a struggling single mom, but I'm making it work Barbie. You have all these different Barbies. Girls can be whatever they want. Barbie fucking blows up again, and it's still a thing. Look, the fucking movie and everything. Yeah. So the revitalization of Barbie, Tom Kalinske. All of a sudden, Mattel's like, Barbies are really popular, but do you know who we're completely missing out on with this? Boys. Design us an action figure or a toy that boys will like. All right, I'm just going to make the most jacked up muscle dude. I'm going to throw a fucking, it's not a bowl cut, but what do you call that haircut?
It's like a bowl cut mullet almost.
It's a bowl cut mullet. All of a sudden, you get He-Man. The guy he invents He-Man. He-Man did not start as a cartoon or anything like that. Everything spawned off of the toy. So all of a sudden, the guy's 3 for 3 on the big ones that he's done. And he's on vacation with his family in Hawaii. All of a sudden, this guy approaches him in a suit, and it's the CEO of Sega. Comes up to him, he's like, hey, Tom knows him essentially just from being in that, not in the video game industry, but essentially toys, things like that. And he's like, what are you doing here? He's like, well, I'm actually coming to look for you. I want you to run the Sega of America division. And he's like, okay. Story goes that his little girl was like, he came all the way from Japan, Papa. You should go with him. And he's like, okay, I guess I'm going with you. So they head over to Japan. They finalize some paperwork. Bingo, bango, bongo. Tom Kalinske is now in charge of Sega of America and now responsible for kind of doing this relaunch or making it more visible for the Genesis.
Yeah, they needed Tom because they had like a golden opportunity with the Genesis and just squandered it.
Yeah.
Because this 16-bit generation that we're going to be talking about with Genesis and Super Nintendo, Genesis releases first in 1989. They were the first 16-bit system, and they used their arcade boards from their cabinets in their machines. They launched a full 2 years ahead of Nintendo. Ooh, almost did it. 2 years ahead in this 16-bit war. But what they did was they launched in North America without a sales and marketing team here. Mm-hmm. Sega of America hadn't even been created yet in a marketing department to try to push this out there. And the sales struggled because there just wasn't anything. 1990 is when his name was Hayao Nakayama, was the guy that we're going to be kind of focusing on with Sega. He fires the former head of Sega of America after they create kind of this marketing department that sucks. They bring in Kalinske, and it's like Kalinske knows exactly what needs to happen to just turn everything around.
Here's my outlook on it. Everybody here is an adult. No one is a kid. Video games are a brand new thing. Yeah. There hasn't been time enough to look back and say, this worked or this worked. It's looking at Nintendo and being like, we know that works. We got it kind of tried to do that thing, but we got to do it better than them. But they're still adults in these marketing things. They're like, what do we do to make this attractive? Do we just show that to them? Like, what do we do for commercials? How do we market this thing? Dude. There's not a blueprint for any of this. And so after Kalinske comes in, he ends up there's already a guy over at Sega of America. His last name is Toyota. I can't remember what his first name is, but I think he was initially sent over there as Nakayama's kind of like mole to keep an eye on Sega of America, but he ends up kind of coming around and wanting to help out. Sits on the board,
checks everything out.
Yeah. So Kalinske is in Japan. He's talking to Nakayama in the office. And basically after kind of doing a study of the Genesis, seeing kind of what their market standing was and everything, he comes back and he's like, I want to do 4 things here.
4-point plan.
It's going to be a 4-point plan. We're going to do it in 4 weeks. Problems are going to be solved. So the 4-point plan proposes cutting the price of the Genesis down to $150. Cutting that at that point, I don't believe that the Nintendo was down that low. I think it was a 179.
Hadn't released yet. The Super Nintendo.
That's what I mean. No. I meant the original.
The NES.
The original was still above that price point because they were, again, they have this, well, they don't have the 2-year gap anymore to do that. I want to create an American team to develop games for an American market. I don't know if anyone has ever noticed, but if you look at games that are popular in Japan and games that are popular over in America, they do tend to differ. There's a lot of crossover for games that are popular, but there definitely is a cultural preference in regards to these games. If you look at things like Final Fantasy, if you look at some of these like fighting games and everything, like some of the samurai or the there's so many different versions of these games, but there tends to be kind of a skew in which games go and they appeal to different countries and different cultures. That wasn't a thing as far as Sega was concerned here. It was just like, these are the games we've been developing for the Japanese market. They've been doing, well enough here. American market is going to be happy just to get these video games. And Tom's like, no, like they like different shit over here. And we have to, if you want them to buy it, you have to give them kind of the stuff that they like.
I'm going to go out on a ledge here with some things that I don't know about that maybe can kind of explain potentially what this difference is. In Japan, they have these things called manga. They're like long form stories with very beautiful pictures and all of that kind of stuff in. And that's very popular over there. Come to America, you get comic books. Comic books are usually 20 pages long?
Look no further than the animation styles. I mean, just between American cartoons and Japanese anime, things like that.
We draw a lot of stuff that have definitive lines in them, whereas Japan, everything looks hand-drawn and very regal. And so they're going to go along more with the role-playing. Also, I think it does have some effect, the fact that it seems like they had these electronics before we did. So maybe they've moved on past just the basic stuff and want the storytelling, because that's kind of how you grow up into games.
They're not advanced enough to really provide any significant type of storytelling.
No.
Okay. Lower the price. We need to have American games. We need to go ahead and continue or expand an aggressive marketing strategy against Nintendo. We're the small guys. We can punch up. No one's going to look at us and punching up and being like, oh, Sega's being bad for that. These guys have a 90% market share. We're essentially David trying to fight Goliath here, so we can continue or, even ramp up more of an aggressive marketing campaign. Now, this is counter to the Japanese way of doing business, where everything is very just polite. I don't want to say even polite. It's respectful. There are certain things you don't do. You don't go after competitors. You let your products do your talking, I think, is more so what it is. Your business acumen.
There's more honor over there.
It's more of an honor culture. There you go. So, and then we're going to also take out this dog shit Altered Beast game that is packaged right now with the Sega Genesis. Because guess what? Americans don't like the Altered Beast game. That was a game probably developed more so with the Japanese audience in mind.
It was an arcade game.
Oh, okay.
So it was a very simple... It's a game that you punch 25 cents into a machine and you play and you're happy with it. So in your house... Oh, yeah. That's the other thing. Sega was so big in the arcade market that they normalized, generalized 25 cents for an arcade game.
Yeah.
Like they
set the standard of 25 cents for it.
That's how big they were. And this Altered Beast game was huge in an arcade, but you need something that tries to fight off Nintendo's biggest killer. And I use that word now twice because they wanted something that was a Mario killer.
Yep.
And they had this game in development at Sega that took this Hedgehog that they were trying to figure out what to do with, and they said, this is going to be the Mario killer. And Kalinske goes, if that's a Mario killer, That's what comes in the bundle at launch.
Yep.
No more Altered Beasts. You can sell that, do whatever you want with it. We need to give these people the first hit of this machine. And I don't know. I mean, I'm not deep into Sonic either, but Sonic the Hedgehog, like the first 5 minutes is just insane. The first 10 minutes is insane. The first couple levels are awesome. And then eventually for me, it gets a little repetitive and I don't like it.
You just have to speed up and go through the loops and everything. At the same time, the visualizations, you're moving so fast. Mario is just like, do-do-do-do-do. You're just scrolling across the screen. Ba-dum, ba-dum. All of a sudden, Sonic is running through. He's jumping through the air. He's into a ball. He's getting all the coins in it or getting all the rings and everything. The colors were vibrant. They were taking advantage of being like, yeah, that's what you get with 16 bits over 8 bits. With this, the development of Sonic was something that was kind of done as part of a contest at Sega of Japan. And then when they got this, everyone was like, we need to develop a character that's going to be our flagship character, our version of Mario. People are drawing up different things in sketches, and a dude over at Sega of America named Al Nielsen. This guy was actually liked playing games. He was kind of like that weird, back in the early 90s, would have been an adult gamer that liked these games. So probably not someone who would have been looked at and been like, oh, he likes, like, what's up with that? But he was looking at this, but because he knew about these games, he knew what was going to be appealing. He ends up picking this sketch of Sonic the Hedgehog. They do some revisions. Basically, did you know Sonic is just like kind of Felix the Cat's head on Mickey Mouse's body?
It fits. It works when you think about it.
And then you just throw the spiky hair off the back. And so he ends up picking the character. The game is then developed around Sonic the Hedgehog, who initially was supposed to have a like Jessica Rabbit type girlfriend named Madonna. And then also he was going to be the leader of a band. And they're like, band's out, big titted girlfriend is out. We want this guy running around capturing rings and trying to get away from Dr. Robotnik. Which America knows it as Dr. Robotnik. Japan knows it as Eggman. So if you ever hear the difference, it's the same guy, just different names.
Big move. I like this guy because he plays a real big part in this story in two different places. Steve Race, named the head of marketing in North America for Sega. Steve Race will come back around in a very big way, kind of when we start talking about the demise of Sega in a different role. But I want to go back to this first point because this first point is brilliant. Like you say, NES is out. If it's $179, if we can cut this down to $150, and we know that they're releasing the Super Nintendo, they're immediately going to be $50 more expensive than us, or they're going to take $50 less than they hope to get for this to try to match us.
There's so many angles to this. Let's release it now. Our more advanced system is already cheaper than their current out-of-date system. And by the time their new system comes out, it's going to be even more expensive. And it's just their system that we can market as, oh, they finally caught up.
Yeah.
They caught up to where we're at now, but now look, they just came out and they're way more expensive than we are.
So, as these sales for the Genesis start to climb with this price cut and with Sonic the Hedgehog catching fire like he did, Nintendo's starting to look at themselves after this 4-point plan approach, and they're like, shit, what are we going to do? We launch in August of 1991. Well, we'll keep the intro price at $200. In order to cut costs, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to cut out the reverse compatibility that we had with the Nintendo to try to make $200 more equitable for us because we know that a price cut's coming.
Yeah.
Eventually, we're going to have to cut this price. So if we can cut this reverse compatibility feature that costs X amount of dollars, that's just more money that we'll save. I get why they do that. They're trying to save money off the top. All of these consoles, we kind of mentioned this, it's all the razor and blade system. Yep.
So essentially how it works with video game consoles is the company takes a hit on the console. I know it doesn't feel like when you have to drop fucking $5.99 or whatever for a PS5 or whatever it is, however much it was for an Xbox. It doesn't seem like you're getting a deal and the company's eating part of that cost, but they are. The money is to be made on the games, much in the same way that they'll sell you the actual razor handle and everything, and the blades themselves are insanely cheap to make, but that's the thing that you need it. So That's how the video game market works.
You're eating money on hardware, you're making money on software.
But the cheaper you can go on the hardware, the less you have to eat. And so, yeah, let's go ahead and get rid of this feature. But at the same time, when you're a parent and you're looking at that and you're saying, okay, so the Sega's already out, has had all this time to actually build up a catalog of games and everything. Super Nintendo's getting ready to come out, and all of a sudden you're like, well, the Genesis is cheaper. It's got more games already on it. And that's already to advantage. That's enough to sway me.
Yeah. If I buy a Super Nintendo for my child, instead of him being able to play 10 games all at the beginning because he has reverse compatibility with his NES, now I have to go out and buy him 5 games to play.
All
right
of this
out of the
stuff
gate.
that I just spent money on a couple years ago and he's never going to touch it again.
Exactly. Yeah, there's nothing. Reverse compatibility is so huge at this point. So after that happens, there's this aggressive marketing against Sony. I love that they do this, and I don't know if this is a chicken or an egg scenario, but they basically put Sonic versus Mario in this Pepsi challenge type environment where they build these big trailers that have TVs, that have a Genesis, that have a Super Nintendo in it. They send kids in, they play the first 5 minutes of Sonic and the first 5 minutes of Mario. And what did we just talk about with the first 5 minutes of Sonic and the first 5 minutes of Mario?
Yeah.
You're getting lights blaring in your face, you're running as fast as you can with Sonic, and you get dun 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 when you're playing Mario.
All of a sudden, you now have Sonic on that screen, looking at the screen, kind of a little bit of an attitude. He's a little bit anti-establishment, where Mario is just this guy that's like, I can't find my girlfriend.
Just a good union plumber.
And this is going to kind of be a theme for Sega. And what they're going to come to realize is that Nintendo it kind of rests on its laurels a little bit. It does want to go ahead and advance, but I think if someone wasn't pushing it, like if the Genesis didn't come out and was dipping into their, profits or digging into their share of the market, they wouldn't have felt as necessary to come out with another system and everything. When the Genesis starts doing this, all of a sudden they're like, okay, we're a little bit more of like we're the hip new thing and everything. You then kind of realize that since the Nintendo's been out for a little bit, gamers that have started with this are starting to get a little bit older. Nintendo's going to stay focused on that cartoonish kind of like more, even between like maybe 6 and 12 years old, kind of that range. Yeah. There's an entire other market of all these people that have been gaming as kids. Let's be that thing that the 12 to 18 to 19-year-olds want. Let's get a little edgy. This is where you start to get, especially with marketing and Steve Race, you start to get this. It's where you get the Sega Scream, where you get these kind of more, it kind of reminds me of like the Attitude Era of like WWE and everything. It's more, a little bit more grown up as far as their advertisements. And then at the end you get that Sega.
Well, just to go through their catalog, because again, these games that they were selling were bolstered by these recognizable names. You have Pat Riley basketball. You have Joe Montana football. 2 guys who I would never say were the most vanilla people around. Pat Riley yelled a hell of a lot. Broadway Joe, I mean, enough can be said there.
Wait, did you say Joe Montana or Joe Namath?
Or Joe Montana, so not Broadway Joe, but still a very, not Steve Young.
Yeah, wasn't Joe Montana's game just repackaged Madden? It was reskinned Madden, I'm pretty sure.
And it ends up coming out on Sega.
Yeah.
The first Maddens that came to consoles were on Sega. You also get Michael Jackson Moonwalker, which brings up a whole nother can of worms. But you're not picking the most vanilla characters. And at this point, Nintendo's awesome. Ice cream's always good. I've never found a bad ice cream, except for mint chocolate chip. But vanilla kind of gets old. And like you're saying, if you eat vanilla from 6 to 12, and then Rocky Road shows up from 12 to 13, you're like, oh shit, I might want to try this. Some of my absolute favorite Genesis games. Did you play much Genesis?
I did.
You play Road Rash?
Oh, yeah. Right, and then whipping the chains at each other and everything.
Kicking, you got the pipe and all that. That shit was awesome.
And these are some of these games were made for both of them and everything. But like I said, my best friend next door had a Genesis, and we did, sleepovers all the time. we'd always bring over the NES, go over to his house and everything. During summers, we would actually camp outside and we would take the TV out and just have the both systems sitting next there. So Road Rash. I learned how to play NBA Jam on a Genesis.
Mutant League Football. You ever play Mutant League Football?
I learned how to play NFL Blitz on a Sega Genesis.
Was Blitz on Genesis?
Blitz was 64, I think. Okay. It looked like the graphics should have had it on.
Yeah,
Genesis.
It was intentional that way. That was a throwback.
But there was another game, and this game has stuck with me my entire life. I'll never forget it. It was called Revolution X. It was an Aerosmith licensed and themed game in which like this terrorist organization kidnapped Aerosmith during one of their concerts, and you had to go rescue them and save the world. And I remember it because there's a scene in which you're fighting guys through and it's just a side scroller, but what it was the little, like, a shooter in an arcade where you aim the gun and it shows the crosshairs on the screen. That's how it was. And you would be going through a strip club, and if you shot the locks on the cages that the girls were in, they'd be like, thank you. And they'd like shimmy off stage and everything. But yeah, like I had a pretty extensive experience with Genesis, and when you're playing another system, the biggest thing that gets you is because the controls are completely different than what you're used to. It does lessen the fun, but shit, it was good.
There was only so much back then that could be different. There were only so many buttons. Nowadays, it's completely different. I don't know how the fuck you run an Xbox controller. There's way too many buttons. There's whites, there's blacks, there's yellows, there's blues, there's greens, there's everything else.
Street Fighter was ruined for me because my buddy was really good at Street Fighter. I mean, like every move and everything. And I couldn't fucking play. I didn't know the controls, let alone how to do the moves on the controls. So like
would be Street Fighter Nintendo?
Both.
Oh, I only played it on Super Nintendo.
They had it also, and I never had it on Super Nintendo, so I didn't even know. I wasn't like, I can translate this over.
Yeah.
I just would get my ass kicked in 3 games, and I'd be like, I'm done with this shit. And he's like, no, come on.
You're catching fireballs from Ken and Ryu, and you don't even know what's going on.
I could never get fucking halfway close because he could launch them so fast.
And it's just certain things like that where you kind of start to see that they are the bad boys of gaming. As stupid as that sentence is to say, because we're still talking about video games in the early 90s, that's just kind of what there was. August 1991.
Hold on. Before we get to that, because that's a major part, let's take a bathroom break.
Okay.
Well, hey there, all you sexy historians. How you guys doing?
It is time for
socials.
Where can they find us on Instagram?
If they want to follow us, they can find us at Historically High Pod on Instagram.
That goes the same for Threads as well. You can also find us on Twitter.
Ooh, tell them about Twitter.
Historically High. That's Historically HI on Twitter.
And if you want to email any of your comments or suggestions, where can they find us at, Adam?
At Historically High Podcast at gmail.com.
Gmail. All right, and back to the show. All right, big moment. Launch of the Super Nintendo.
And there's no, we're going to get out of this early, or get this out early. I know we're an hour in, but it's early for this. There's no coincidence that these release dates for these games, or these consoles, usually come in August, September, October, or November.
Mm-hmm.
Because you always launch it right before the Christmas season, because that's when you're going to be selling the most of these things.
Oh, definitely. And launching it more, you got to find that happy medium. Because if you're launching it too early in the year and you're like, ask for it for Christmas, it's like, it's 7 months away. Like, my birthday's in between there.
You're going to get nagged for 7 months as opposed to 2 months.
Exactly. So I think that sweet spot has got to be, they do it in like November now, I think, mostly. But I think October was always that sweet spot. Here's the deal. I think they do it in November now, because most of the people buying these are adults. That's what most gamers are now, is they are adults. It's because we grew up with that.
You have to get it to somebody early enough to where they can justify buying it before Christmas presents.
Boom.
But also be able to ask for stuff for it for Christmas.
Yes.
Like you're getting both ends of it.
It used to have to be, it had to be earlier because your parent had to be like, fuck, I got to save up $199. I've already bought some gifts, but now they want this one. I got to save up for it. Now it's all we got to do is tell all of these adults that it's coming out. Let them know that it's coming out a month before Christmas. Chances are they're going to go out and buy it before Christmas, but it'll give them, I got to set aside money in my next paycheck or whatever to try to buy this. Their demographic has definitely changed on who's actually paying for this stuff.
And we get August 1991 SNES drops. And through this first holiday season, even though you have all of the excitement of the Super Nintendo dropping, Genesis still outsells over that Christmas season Super Nintendo 2-1.
It's the known quantity.
And the price point.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah, what was the price point on the Super Nintendo?
I believe it was $200. Dropped to $149, so I believe it was $200, yeah. Because SNES realizes pretty quickly, like, shit. Because 1992, Genesis controls 65% of the market. They are ahead. This is the first time since 1985 that Nintendo wasn't the market leader.
Yeah.
Like, that's a pretty big hit.
Serious threat.
And we're talking about a time when just because it's 65% doesn't mean that Nintendo still doesn't have more of the market. It's just this 16-bit console market.
Again, Nintendo also has all of their own games.
And
they're not
NES
having to go,
still.
Exactly. And so all those games are still going toward their profits. Yeah, $199. When it came out in Japan, because it always comes out earlier in Japan, it was called the Super, what was the name of it? Something Com.
Super Famicom?
Famicom. So because it comes out in Japan and because Sega also has an office in Japan, they get the hands on one and they send it over to Sega of America. Sega of America gets it, unwraps it. What was it? Famicom?
Super Famicom.
They get it hooked up and Al, God, I can't remember what his name is. No, Nielsen sits down. They're like, tell us what you think of it. Because he's the one that has experience. So he's playing it and he's like, something kind of weird. He's like, this does not feel like it's like a true 16-bit game. He's like, maybe 12 or something. And that could have been just because it was the first game.
Yeah.
The SNES didn't launch with games like Donkey Kong Country, like the ones that really showed off like what it could possibly do. When it first came out, it was kind of like lacking a little bit in some games, and they weren't really that big of a leap past the regular Nintendo. And so people just didn't respond to it enough. There wasn't enough of a buzz around it or enough incentive to be like, it's not that much of a jump.
Looks wise too. If you're pushing this marketing strategies aimed at younger adults, and you make the Sega look cool, it's sleek, it's black, it's not bulky, it doesn't look like a VCR. It's something completely different.
It's even alien.
Yeah. It just completely changes the way that it all works. And yeah, like you say, at this point in 1992, we get the Sega Scream. That sells commercials at the end every single time. You just wait for it, and you can almost time it. It's like smoke weed every day.
Yeah.
And Dr. Dre, you do the exact same shit to Sega.
I was trying to think of other references to Sega because when you go back and you think of movies that were around this time, how stuff got peppered in, and you kind of wonder if there was placement on it. Do you remember I don't know if you've seen like a She's All That guy.
Is that Amanda Bynes?
No, that's She's the Man. You were close. No, Freddie Prinze Jr. and Rachel Lee Cook, the one where they turned the Janie Boggs or whatever into she's an ugly girl with paint on her, and she wears glasses, and all of a sudden she takes off her glasses and throws on some decent clothes, and she's hot as shit.
This is the spoof movie.
No. You're thinking not another teen movie about that, but that's what they... Paul Walker was, I think. He was the dude that was betting Freddie Prinze Jr. that he couldn't turn her into like... Anyway,
it's been redone many times. But I've
you
never
get that
seen
song
that.
where she's coming down the stairs where it's like, kiss me out on the broken.
I remember that. I like that song.
Anyway, very important Sega reference in this game where she's telling him to go away. And he's like, actually, your brother just invited me. He's like the most popular dude in school. The little brother, who's like a freshman, invites him inside. He's like, you want to play some Sega? And he's like, maybe some other time. She comes up. She's like, you need to go away. He's like, actually, I have plans. Your brother invited me inside to play Sega. And he's like, really? He's like, oh, yeah. Looks like it's going to be a long afternoon of Sega. And then the brother's like, Sega!
You got to think Macaulay Culkin is playing a Sega in Home Alone.
Yeah?
I want to say that I saw it in there. Maybe it's just my mind telling me that. But he's kind of the perfect archetype of this kid that becomes a little badass.
Their marketing strategy too, and I think it might have been Steve Race, where Nintendo had kind of gone after, if they were going to have any type of spokesman or anything like that, it was always going to be like a Hollywood actor or something like that. Yeah. They're like, that's not who's playing these games or anything. Sega goes out and they're like, who's on fucking Tiger Beat right now? Or on Teen Whatever It Was magazine. They get Joey Lawrence. They get Jonathan Taylor Thomas. They get some of the people from Boy Meets World. They're going through all of these, like, who are the, like, hot young people that younger people are looking at to see what they're doing. And they bring them in and have, like, this Sega party where they're all playing and they're showing off all the graphics. Jonathan Taylor Thomas is like, the graphics do this and it's really cool and everything. It's the best gaming system out there. And you just, around the country, millions of girls that are fucking obsessed with this kid go up and be like, I need a fucking Sega.
Mingus is over in the corner playing a Nintendo. Mm-hmm. Just along those lines, this blows me away that this happened, but Nintendo counters this by using their already established, it was called Nintendo Power Gaming Magazine. This is like the beginning of the gaming magazine startups.
We got Game Pro, Tips and Tricks. I think there were there were specific ones for like PlayStation Magazine, Xbox Magazine. Kids, this is what we had before the internet allowed us to do walkthroughs. There used to be walkthrough guidebooks that you could buy with these games that would help you. You don't just get to, now listen, I'm guilty. I get on the internet all the fucking time because I don't want to miss shit while I'm playing.
Pull up YouTube, get a run through. If you miss something 15 times, you watch a GTA mission and how it's done when you finally give up.
But back in the day, you'd be playing a game and you couldn't get past a level. You'd be stuck. Your buddies couldn't. That was the only web of influence that you had. You had no one else to talk to. All of a sudden that month, Nintendo Power Magazine came out. Tips and tricks on the very game you're having trouble with. Mom, I need that. You know what? I need a subscription to it is what I need. Guess what? If you're not getting Nintendo Power Magazine, we have the Nintendo Hotline. That you could call
$1.99 a minute.
That you could call up and they have all the games in front of them and you're stuck on a certain point and they can get to that point and walk you through on how to beat it. Like they had that kind of stuff just figured. It's because they had so much experience being like, no, for everything. Yeah. We need something of everything.
And Nintendo had their own propaganda wing with a magazine. Sega has to wait for these other publications to get big to be able to get their message out. Like in print, Nintendo is the only thing going because they're the only one of the magazine.
Yeah.
This new market position that Nintendo finds itself in, like, well, shit, we're looking up at somebody now. What do we do? We got to lower the Super Nintendo down to 150 to match what Genesis has been at.
They had to do it after only a year of the system being out. They had to go down. And then what does Genesis do right after?
129.99.
Genesis is like, motherfuckers, we've been at 150 for like the past 5 years. Yeah, we can drop ours down an extra 20 or 30 bucks and still be lower than you.
Okay, well, I mean, I guess if you're going to do it, we'll do it too. You guys going to do it again? No, 150 I think we're pretty good at. Like, the Nintendo wasn't going to continue to play this game.
So 92 is when all this is going down. And another event happens in 92 that creates a wave, a buzz around the video game industry. A arcade fighting game that is currently just in arcades, like in cabinets and everything, comes out called Mortal Kombat. I think Midway is the one that actually produced it. And this is the biggest thing that stands out to me about original Mortal Kombat is like the photo. I don't know what you would consider it. The way the characters are, it's like the photo realistic where it almost, I'm trying to think of the way.
It almost looks more drawn than anything.
Not even drawn, but it looks like they had guys like doing, you would take a picture of a guy in a costume and then have him do another pose and another, and then they just did all those
stop
together.
Motion almost?
Kind of.
Stop motion frame?
But fluid.
Yeah.
It had that style to it, but oh my God, there's, what is that coming out of his face? It's blood. Oh my God, you just beat him. What did you just ripped his fucking spine out. I must have this game.
Scorpio's firing snakes out of his hands.
Scorpion? Yeah, get over here. Scorpion, Sub-Zero, freezing guys and then breaking their heads off.
Raiden's got electricity coming out of his eyes.
You get the dude chopping people in half with his giant hat.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is just taking over arcades. And being in the home console business, you know that anything popular in arcades is going to be even more popular if you can get it into people's hands at home. So Nintendo and Genesis are both looking at this and like, we want it. We got to have this thing. They both actually get the rights to this game. And I think they kind of released them at the same time in September of 93. Now, there's a what seems like a subtle difference that's not going to go ahead and make the game unplayable between Nintendo and Sega. Nintendo has just chosen, hey, when someone gets punched in the face, can we just make that look like either like sweat or maybe like green slime or something like that coming out?
You're beating the load out of somebody.
Yeah. And then the part where he does the really cool thing at the end where he like kills the guy, it just... all of it gone.
I think you guys call it a fatality. That's fatality's not a word we like to use.
Have them just fall down, and then that'll be good. That's what we'll do at Nintendo. And Sega's like, leave it all in. Add more. Add more if you guys possibly can.
No sweat in this game. We're looking at just blood.
Sega ends up outselling, regards to this game, I think like 5-1. But this game, because all of a sudden now it's in homes, information about the graphic nature of this finds its way to Senator Joseph Lieberman, I believe. And all of a sudden we get this. Was this before or after Nancy Reagan and the whole... This was after.
It would have to have been because this is the 90s. Reagan was 80.
Oh, that's right. So Nancy was the music industry, parental advisory. So now
say no to drugs.
And Lieberman now has his Nancy moment. He's like, this is my Nancy moment.
Probably sucked a few less dicks, but not no dicks.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that, the video games are not corrupting our youth. Rah, 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 rah. So he actually calls both Nintendo and Sega to a congressional hearing. I think Sega sends a guy named Bill White. And Bill White actually used to work for Nintendo. And after he was like, Nintendo's not really going in, it's not growing up. It's just doing the same type of stuff. He sees what Sega's doing, jump ship, goes over to Sega. And throughout this whole thing of the competition, all of these people are actually interacting at trade shows and at launches for these things and events and everything. There's a lot of crossover between these employees, and things are getting pretty chippy already. So Tom Kalinske is like, let's send Bill. Because they'll fucking hate having Bill there because he used to work for Nintendo. He can also attest to things over at Nintendo.
He also knows how to toe the line, too, because he was taught in Nintendo.
Yeah, and the guy that Nintendo was sending, Nintendo of America, was a guy named Howard Lincoln. He's like, and it'll fucking piss off Howard. So they go to this congressional hearing, and the games that were kind of brought to attention were, of course, Mortal Kombat, and then also this game called Night Trap. Did you read about Night Trap?
Mm-mm.
Okay. I see why Night Trap was included in here. Night Trap, and I just read the description, and that was enough to kind of sell me, but not sell me on it. Night Trap is a game in which there is a sleepover of high school girls, teenage girls. And you are a character that is watching these girls through like security monitors and cameras and everything. What the girls do not know, however, you're not watching, or you're watching them. They don't know that.
Yeah.
But that they have chosen a house infested with vampires as their location for a sleepover. Your job in this is to watch these girls, and in order to guide them through the house and keep them safe from vampires. So it's like a Peeping Tom horror movie or something. You don't know how this kind of shit gets made.
No, the 90s were a wild time, man.
So they're talking about this. They're talking about Mortal Kombat mostly. And Lieberman's up there being like, basically, you're corrupting the youth. You're the Grinch who stole Christmas in our children's innocence. Rah, 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 rah. And Bill and Nintendo's basically being like, no, man, like we took all the bad stuff out of the game. It's just dudes punching each other in the face and women beating each other up until one of them is unconscious. It's totally fine. Like other games do that. And Bill's over here being like, okay, yeah, our games are violent and everything, but I mean, what's this? And he ends up pulling out the Nintendo. There were so many accessories for Nintendo.
Yeah.
There was a running pad for track stuff. There was the Duck Hunt gun. There was the Nintendo Power Glove.
Yes.
But this was a it was like a targeting scope, but it looked like almost like a rocket launcher that you scoped through. And I guess you could play like tank games and things like that. You probably play Duck Hunt with it, but he pulls
Duck
this
Hunt
out
with a rocket launcher.
Yeah, that's what it looked like. He pulls this out and he's like, Nintendo's fucking making like rocket launchers for their games and everything. Like, yeah, this guy had his spine ripped out, but that's one person. Like, you can kill a lot of people with rockets. Lieberman is just basically like, okay, that does look like a weapon. So this is actually very disturbing on all accounts. And tells them, okay, we're not going to do anything to you right now, but you guys need to get together and establish some type of like rating system like they do for both movies and now kind of with music. And we're going to check in a year to see how it's going.
To this day, it's called the ESRB. You know what it's called, what it stands for?
I have no idea, but you'll always hear it as rated E for everyone.
Yep.
Rated M for mature. Those are the ones you want. M for mature.
Well, it definitely makes sense. I don't think it ever really stopped anything. I don't know if I ever purchased a game where anybody ever asked me for an ID. Like, just because it was on the game doesn't mean that anybody enforced it.
Yeah.
Same thing with CDs.
Mm-hmm.
It was never that enforced. To go back and clean something up, and this is just to point out kind of what's coming later. July 31st, 1989, the Game Boy is released. We have mobile gaming hitting the market.
Mm-hmm.
Mobile gaming with the Game Boy. Black and white screen. Black and white graphics.
Tiny screen.
Green and white, I guess, is what you would say.
It was yellow. It was like almost a backlit type yellow and then gradient, like gray and black and everything.
I never had a Game Boy.
Oh, buddy.
I believe I had a Game Boy Color.
Oh, buddy. So this is going to make me sound like such a fucking trash person from a trash family.
I think it's ingenuitive.
So you know how families would have like every house has the house that everyone just goes to the bathroom, and very seldom do like, you know, everyone go to like the parents will go to their bedroom. It's a long way to walk. Everyone just has a communal bathroom.
Yeah.
In that communal bathroom, some people have magazines. I don't know what people have today. We had a Game Boy, and it was loaded with Tetris. And so you would sit down to take a shit. You would turn around, grab it out of the basket. You turn
It had its own basket?
Oh, yeah, on the back. I mean, you don't set it on the counter. You're not savages. Had its own basket. And you flip it on, and it would fire up. And then you would sit there and you would try to beat the high score on Tetris. After you're done taking a shit, put it back up there, turn around and wipe your ass and everything. Just thinking of it from a sanitary standpoint, this, you know, as an adult, it's pretty fucking disgusting, but it's also pretty trashy. Knowing how much time was probably wasted in there trying to get like additional.
Buddy, people play crosswords in the bathroom.
I was going to say, it's your phone in the bathroom.
Yeah. Yep. My only really, I had a Game Boy Color, and it was just because I was so annoying to travel with that eventually, once my brother moved out of the house and they're like, you got nobody to mess with in the back, here, take this, shut up and sit back there and play your games.
Okay, that just reminds me of a point I wanted to ask. When it was the adults talking to like retailers and stuff like that, or like the salesman talking to retailers, or even when they would be doing demos, kids would be playing the games, they'd be talking to the adults about price points and everything. How much do you think of these parents buying it? And I'm thinking of it from my perspective as a parent as well. You were like, so like how long, like, do they stay entertained for long? It's like, oh, they'll fucking sit in front of it for like hours without doing anything. Lies just locked on the screen. They're like, that's fucking worth $200.
Yeah.
Any fucking day of the week. Wow, that, like, seriously, he's like, yeah, actually just watch. Like, we can stand here as long as you want and watch your kid play, and he won't even, like, call his name.
You want to go get lunch? We'll come back.
He just stands up. He's like, check this out. He's like, see all the kids playing right now? He just holds up a fucking bullhorn or an air horn. He's like, none of them move. He's like, do you see that? So do I pay you here right now, or...
Here's $300.
Yeah, exactly.
This is that
if you
much.
can go snag me one out of the back.
We also have Sega hitting the market with the Sega Game Gear in North America, 1991.
Game Gears looked so cool.
They did, but they looked like a battery-powered handheld TV. Like, you remember those back in the day that you would always see the trope was a dude would be watching a football game
with
in
the
church.
Antenna.
Yeah,
with the antenna sticking up and the little stringed head,
It definitely did not look the same. For as vertical as the Game Boy was, the Game Gear was horizontal.
Yeah, it was. If you think of it, it's kind of like a Nintendo Switch is now, bulkier because all of it was the unit. And it had, of course, the screen, one flat screen back then, but it had a bigger screen. It was colored. Thing is with being larger, being in color, the battery life was just horrible on it. It had a whole bunch of drawbacks, not a ton of games, but these things are all about like you do this, we have to do something similar. We know you're in development of this, we have to try to go ahead and match that. So Game Boy 89, Game Gear 90, Game Gear did not take off. The Game Boy just kind of blew it out of the water. It had the advantage of coming out first. People already had one that were going to have one. And I think the price tag on the Game Gear was more than the Game Boy. I'm not sure. It seems like it would have to be.
Tom Kalinske makes an ad campaign to try to attack Game Boy, and he ends up having to apologize for what happens. So he goes ahead and basically says, and this is 1994.
Shit was wild in 94.
Sega advertisement that says, if you were colorblind, had the IQ of less than 12, then you wouldn't mind the portable that you had. Like, he was just pointing out about how if you were dumb, if you were easily entertained, you wouldn't want a color screen, and you would be able to handle a Nintendo Game Boy.
He might as well have just been like, had an ad where someone walked up to someone playing Game Boy. It's like, Game Boy, huh? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, so you fuck your sister, huh?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much. He ends up having to go back and apologize for it. There's so many little things. Supposedly, and this was just a story that I heard a one-off of, so I'm not sure, Nintendo named it the Game Boy as a shot at Sony because Sony had the Walkman.
Oh.
So it was...
So were they even... Oh, to just be chirpy?
A little bit, but at the same time, like, this is for kids, whereas you guys have a CD player for a man.
Here's the other thing, too. They're very literal when they name stuff. So it's just like, what is this thing? Well, if the Nintendo Entertainment System is like the parent, this would be like its son. Mm-hmm. So it's a boy. Yeah. So it's a Game Boy. Boy game. Flip it around.
Genesis.
Yeah.
We're talking about the beginning of something, even though there was other things before this.
He's like, boy game. He's like, that's something that they do in Thailand. No, it needs to be Game Boy.
We're not selling this in Greece. Boy game doesn't work. Mm-hmm. So, kind of getting back to where our story is, to clean up Mortal Kombat, 6.5 million copies are sold. As Chris said, the Genesis version sells like 4 to 5 times more of this. ESRB rating system is established because Joe Lieberman had a stick up his ass, and then he, maybe not as much now, maybe I got to take that back after Night Trap. Hearing about Night Trap has kind of shaken me a little bit. But this war keeps going on, and ultimately, in the end of this 16-bit era, Sega drops the ball completely because they start forcing these add-ons to try to, instead of creating a new system, to keep working towards the goal of getting there. And one of the things they do is they come up with this thing called the Sega CD. Now, this is very advantageous when you're talking about writing games, because if you have a cartridge, that cartridge only has so much memory on it to be able to hold anything that you want in a game.
Yeah.
If you can go to a CD-ROM and you can write it, you can 10x that amount of memory on there to put better graphics into a game, or not better graphics, but to put more detail into a game, to make it go longer. We're kind of starting to see where you're going to expand. We're not there yet with a memory card idea, but we're getting there.
Everything has to be saved on the device itself. It's kind of like they go back and forth, and it must be kind of more of a Japanese leaning thing, is when you have something that's working well, just keep doing that. Like, you don't need to, like, if it's still doing well, then, don't worry. Why are we having to put money into doing something different? Well, Nintendo had that. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, keep going.
Nintendo had that, I think, a little bit, but with the Genesis, as soon as the numbers started going up and everything, you would know that, okay, we need to start working on the next level of this thing, because in the half-life of this, Nintendo went ahead and dropped the Super Nintendo. We should already be 2 years into that, and in 2 or 3 years, we'll drop the next thing that'll go ahead and recapture our share, take us to the next level. Instead, they were just like, well, there's nothing wrong with the Genesis. Is there any way we could just, make it better? and everything with just some like stuff they sell. And Kalinski's over here thinking, no, like the progression is the systems themselves have to keep getting more advanced, not just, look at the controls. The controls have already switched. So you can't just keep the same thing and expect the games to get more advanced, but you can't control the advanced features. We need to kind of innovate and keep going. They're like, no. So we're going to go ahead and get this thing, the Sega CD, 1992. It goes on the side of the Genesis. It just kind of clicks in, or I don't know even know.
I thought it said on top of it.
No. That's actually going to be the Sega 32X.
Okay, yeah, we'll talk about that in a second.
Yep. So the Sega CD actually just sits on the side of it, connects to it, and then it was because of the disc they could fit. Was it larger games, right? Yep. Like more expansive games. It didn't hit like they were expecting it to hit. It sold enough that they, I don't even know if they could justify it, but
2.2 million units. It's not nothing.
Yeah. I guess I never knew anyone or even heard of anyone with a Sega CD. That's kind of my litmus test. Did I hear somebody had it? Yeah.
Well, and I don't blame Sega for this approach because Sega's past and Sega's history is in arcade. And you don't have to worry about what the hardware looks like in an arcade game because it's in a cabinet. So you can do advances to an arcade system and have it just sitting in a cabinet to where instead of just having a cartridge or whatever in there, you can just go ahead and plug a CD-ROM in there. Nobody sees it. Nobody knows it, but you can talk about how everything gets better.
If we have to, we'll add a little bit of processing power to the device. Yeah. It'll use the rest of the processing power through the other thing and just keep working. And and they were still on par with the whole, we're 16-bit war right now.
Yep.
They're still on par, essentially parity, 16 bits each. So if anything, let's maybe not try to do the thing that everyone's expecting us to do and go up to 32 bits. Let's maybe see if we can go up 5 bits. People love this bit shit. So just do the Sega CD add-on. It'll bump us up some bits and everything. And then 2 years later, they're like, all right, the Sega CD is not doing too hot. Guess what, Tom? We're actually developing this new thing. He's like, a new console? It was like, no, it goes on the top and clicks into the old console. And then you put the game in the top of that. And we're going to call it the 32X. It's going to have all these added features with 3D capability to it.
800,000 units sold.
Yeah.
Not good. This is a number that is pretty much nothing.
3 didn't.
This is just, again, instead of focusing on a new system, which eventually they have to do, but to jump up to 32 bits, they're like, we can just attach this. Nobody will think about how god awful this thing looks sitting in the living room or wherever anybody can see this, how unfunctional it is because there's certain games that aren't equipped to be able to do this. So it's just not going to do anything. You have to create it within. You have to put all of these new electronics inside the machine instead of just trying to tack things on because visually it's seen, and you have to have people at home to know how to put all this shit together to make it work. It's not feasible.
Well, and, Sega was kind of working on something that they were going to launch as a new console, but when you're having to, instead of just going, if you look at it now, you think of, and it's much easier now because if anything needs to be updated, you can get an update that can increase the performance and give you additional features. Wasn't possible, of course, back then. But what you would normally do is you would just go ahead and have your flagship consoles that you would launch, and you would spend all of your resources during the interim time developing that next console. What Sega is essentially doing is they're saying well, we're developing the next console, but we're also having people that could be developing it work on the Sega CD. And we're also having people that could be working on that to make it better, working on the Sega 32X. They're doing things piecemeal. They're doing stuff like half measures. And when the Sega Saturn ends up coming out in 95, it's got the 32-bit. Or sorry, this had 64, right?
32.
I thought the Saturn had the two 32-bit chips.
I don't think so.
Okay, yeah, we're not there yet.
Yeah, we're not quite there yet. But we're talking about an era in this 32-bit war that is probably my favorite part of the console wars just in total. Nintendo starts to move towards this 32-bit era with this new partner, and we get a company that everybody knows and loves now and is, in my opinion, the number one console maker in the world, Sony.
We're living proof.
Yeah.
That the aisle can be crossed.
No, not for me. I'm pretty much just...
No. I'm not saying that it can be crossed in the sense like I'm coming over to fucking PlayStation. I'm saying we can just agree to disagree.
Yeah,
because
okay.
also,
Yes,
if we ever want to play together, cross-play's available.
This is Bloods in the Crips holding their handkerchiefs. Kent Kutaragi is known as the father of the PlayStation. He starts working with Nintendo in this 32-bit era on this development of this Super NES CD-ROM.
The Nintendo PlayStation.
Yep. Just a crazy thought that this ever could have happened. And the whole partnership gets started with Super Nintendo's having just god-awful audio. Sony says, hey, we have these chips. We can put these audio chips in here. It makes everything sound good. Let's sign this contract. Sony and Nintendo agreed to this contract for these sound chips, for the SNES, for the Super Nintendo. And then they start talking about, well, we need to go to discs. And Nintendo was very hesitant to move to discs.
And Sony's like, just so happens, didn't they invent the CD, or at least jointly invent the CD?
That I don't know.
I want to say they did. I did.
Probably. I wouldn't doubt it.
But they're like, we can handle that as well.
And as soon as this starts coming around, they start to see basically that this new hardware that Sony's going to be making with these CDs is a really bad deal for them, or software. This new software that they're coming out with is going to be a very bad deal for Nintendo. Nintendo doesn't necessarily tell them that they're going to squash this deal, but they say it's probably not going to happen. Sony gets up, I believe it was at the consumer conference.
Yeah, okay. There's a little bit more to this before the consumer conference. So I kind of a little more in depth on that. So they had partnered up to go and create the Sony PlayStation. Sony actually made an announcement like 2 or 3 days.
That was that conference.
Oh, yeah. Fully acknowledging that they're in partnership with Nintendo to go and develop this CD-based. Nintendo got on board because essentially they saw they could make longer games. Yeah. They were able to store more memory, things like that. And so, yeah, they had actually told them for those 2 days, they believed that this thing was going down and going to be announced by Nintendo at CES, or the Consumer Electronics Show. During this time, Nintendo is, I'm trying to think of what the reasoning on it was. They believed that because they were designing the sound chip for it and everything, they were also designing the sound chip for, I want to say like a new Nintendo console, or it was something different.
I thought it was the software, the CD-ROMs that they were going to be using in the Nintendo CD. Mm-hmm. The licensing was going to revert more back to Sony than they were comfortable with.
Because the games were going to be on disc. It was something like that, right? Okay. So all of a sudden, Nintendo starts getting panicked because that's their bread and butter, is being just software. Able to
make money off of licensing the software.
Yep, exactly. The cartridges, basically. And they go to a few days before, or during the, speaking of this deal, they take a little trip up to Philips. And I think Philips is in the Netherlands or something like that.
Yeah.
Denmark or the Netherlands. And they're like, oh yeah. I don't think that's how they really talk, but they end up coming
I've been to an IKEA. I've seen it.
They end up coming to an agreement where Philips is basically just like, oh yeah, we'll totally partner up with you on a CD and do all that kind of stuff. And we'll give you like super favorable rates. It'll be great for everyone. And Nintendo's like, done. They fail to mention this to Sony.
So it was like the next day after Sony makes the comment during the talk about partnering up with Nintendo. Mm-hmm. Nintendo comes out and announces their partnership with Philips and just leaves Sony in the wind. So Sony's like, well, we've actually been working on a couple things ourselves in development of this PlayStation. I think we're just going to release on our own.
They went after Nintendo at first, and they were like, you guys realize that we had a contract to be working on this. We had an agreement to work on this thing together. And Nintendo's like, yeah, we plan on honoring the agreement. They're like, what do you mean? You're going with Philips. That's not honoring. They're like, we will honor the agreement. What they meant by that is we'll let you develop the PlayStation. And so the guy that was kind of in charge of this, because Sony wasn't really interested. They wouldn't have even broached this had Nintendo not kind of come to them and talked to them about this and they were able to come to some type of conclusion. At this point, Sony's like, well, if Nintendo's not going to help us, we're not really going to pursue this. The guy that was in charge of their games division, the small portion of it, ends up going to meet with the CEO, and I want to say the president of Sony. And in the meeting, they're talking about the future of the games division, and everyone is going around and being like, we're not even in this thing, really. You know, we might as well, if we're not in it, we're not really into it for that much money. We may as well not even try. We don't have the infrastructure to do that. It finally gets around to the games guy, and he's like, you know what? Yeah, I don't think we should develop the Nintendo PlayStation or anything like that. I think it's good that we're not doing that. I think we should develop the Sony PlayStation. And we already have something. I've already mocked something up. I already have an idea of how we can do this. 3D graphics, better than they can do it. And more than that, this is how we're going to take our revenge. And he basically calls out like the president and the CEO and is talking to him. He's like, do you see how much they disrespected you?
Yeah.
They disrespected you in front of the world. They made Sony look weak. We can't go after them, legally or anything. But what we can do is we can take their market share. We can take what they think that they own. And they're like, we're doing this. You have permission. They sent the games division, because it was all stuffy within like the corporate offices where they were. They sent them over to the like record label that Sony had owned.
Yeah.
And you guys are going to go over there. You're going to work on this PlayStation, and you need to get this thing working.
Kutaragi pushed for this so hard. There's so many different parts of his story where he almost feels like he's putting himself on he's putting his job on the line.
This is all he wanted to do.
Yeah. And it's all he wanted to do for the rest of his life. And he wanted to make sure that this happened. So, of course, he's going to use the honor that Sony has to be like, they disrespected us. Now it's time to take what they feel is precious. Mm-hmm. And as soon as this happens, we got to flash back to Sega, because this is maybe the funniest series of events. This 1995 E3. So Sega Saturn plans to...
But you are correct. It had 216. That's how they were planning to get to 32 is... I think Nintendo, when they had developed... Because what was their 32-bit? They skipped.
They didn't.
That's right. They thought that they were going to go 32, and then
the Sony CD-ROM ends up not panning out with Philips, so they just go ahead and step out of 32. 32 is a two-horse race. This is Saturn, and this is PlayStation.
Okay. So, yeah, when they go to actually... And at this point, once this Sony PlayStation gets approved and there's an actual division here, who do they tap to actually run this thing? As far as like the Sony America portion of it.
Steve Race. That same guy that was in charge of marketing for Sega. Mm-hmm. And Sega at this point in time, I don't know what it was that they were grasping at straws, just what was going on in Sega's mind. But Sega had set up this very good pattern, and I'm sure it had something to do with Kalinske, where every single game that came out, there was a release date, there was a release party. We were going to make this something special. And if you're on the retail side, supply chain, toy companies, anything like that, there is a certain amount of like, okay, we can prepare for this. We can make sure that everything is correct and ready for this release date. This isn't just like, hey, we got 60 of this game in today, release it now.
It was a big pop instead of it just trickling out a little bit
at a time. Yeah.
Because that's how we're so used to game launches now, where a game will launch at midnight. Everyone's fucking playing all night long. That didn't used to happen, because these developers and the shipping and everything like that, once you got a shipment of games, if those were shipped out, they were releasing in, if they came in the port of Los Angeles, you were getting them on the West Coast before they reached the East Coast. And so it was like, hey, I heard this new game is coming out. Have you guys received it? It's like, check back next week to see if it's in our shipment. Yeah. And with Sega, they had organized this to where it's now kind of the model or the formula that's modeled after. They decided to do this thing called Sonic Tuesday, when they were releasing Sonic 2, and they had arranged it to be done all over like basically a worldwide release on Sonic Tuesday. Well, at this point, it was Nakayama. There was some sense that because of the success that Sega of America was having, that there was a little bit of jealousy that Sega of Japan wasn't having the same success. And so I don't know if it was out of spite or anything, but he ends up releasing Sonic 2, I think 2 days early in Japan.
Oh my God. Just completely falls away from the plan.
Yeah.
The plan that has worked to bring them to the prominence that they are.
Everything that Kalinske has told him has actually worked.
And so when you roll up to Saturn, this whole idea, originally September 2nd, 1995 is when the Saturn is going to launch. We roll up May 11th, 1995 at the E3 conference.
This is the first E3. We're seeing the birth of this. This is where and E3 is insane now.
This is the firework that gets it started. So,
real quick, sorry.
Oh.
There's something that happened before E3 that even leans more toward the drama between Nakayama and Kalinske. So Kalinske knew that it was going to be like 3D graphics, things like that were going to be the wave of the future. He's got his fucking finger to the pulse. And so there's this company, I can't remember exactly where it was, but it was called Silicon Graphics.
It was in California, I believe.
So Silicon Graphics, they get together and he's like, these are the new Silicon chips and everything. This is what they can do, showing them all of these 3D images and everything. And Kalinske's like, this is fantastic. We have to have this. This is going to be an insane game changer for Sega. So he goes to Nakayama and he's like, we need to partner with these guys for the Sega. They're going to be able to take us, the Saturn or whatever it's going to be, to the next level. Nakayama's like, yeah, well, I mean, we see how good it is and everything, but we don't want to be beholden to any other chip manufacturer and have to get them. We like to do that kind of stuff ourselves.
Keep it in-house.
Yeah, we like to do that. So no, we're not going to go ahead and do that for you. And so Kalinske's like, well, fuck. So he must have been pretty good friends with the dude that was in charge at Silicon Graphics, or he was just super fucking pissed at Nakayama because he ends up calling the dude at Silicon Graphics and is like, deal can't go through. And he's like, really? He's like, what am I supposed to do with this? He's like, you might want to go ahead and make a call up to Redmond, Washington and see if Nintendo might be interested in it. He's like, seriously? He's like, yeah, might as well go and call them. So he ends up calling them. Silicon Graphics and Nintendo get hooked up. We'll talk about what they launch here in a second. But in addition to that, there was a chance for Sega to partner with Sony. And Nakayama, this deal is actually very, very close to being completed and would have essentially the two resources of these companies going together on what would be a Sega product, but would basically be the Sega PlayStation, in essence, is what it was going to be.
We just keep somebody's trying to get Sony in the ring with them.
Yeah. Nakayama ends up shooting this down too. And at this point, Kalinske is just like, what are you fucking doing here? He stays with it and everything, but I mean, these are two insane missed opportunities that I'm not trying to make this seem out like it's earth shattering, but
if you're Sega, it was,
but we could be looking at a very different landscape for this would affect so many people. Can you imagine if they would have teamed up and we would still have a Sega PlayStation 5? It'd be like SPS 5.
I think Sony probably would have cut bait with them eventually. I think there would have been a split just because I think Sony has a lot of pride, and we'll talk about it in round two. But
they wanted this deal to work though too.
Yeah.
And Nakayama ends up fucking putting the kibosh to that. So now we come to E3 in 95.
Oh boy. This is the stuff that it's rare to see I'm not going to call it a murder on screen, but just how this plays out. So Kalinske goes up, he does his keynote speech for Sega, runs up there. He says, it's May 11th. I think today's it's something along the lines of, I know that we said this was going to be September 2nd, but what we're going to do is today you can walk into any store and you can buy a Sega Saturn. We're dropping this today.
And that's basically him being told to make a shit sandwich palatable, because back in Sega of Japan, this thing was not supposed to get pushed up like this. Mm-mm. There was still stuff they were supposed to work on. This is going to... Launch games are huge with video games. Any gamers on here know that. If you're not familiar with it, you're selling the console, but you have to have something to play it on. So you need a big flagship, or at least a pretty decent selection of games, so you have something for everybody when it launches. Moving something up like this, like what was it, 5 or 6 months, I think, for the Saturn?
From May till September, so 4 months.
Yeah. May to September. Oh, like it was the previous year, though. It was supposed to be May of this year, and he went back.
No, it was 90.
How does it go May to September?
Yeah, May to September 95.
Okay, so it was going to be released previously in September
of 1995.
Correct, and then it got forwarded to May.
Yeah.
Sorry, I like how we got to that. It took us way longer than it should have. You're missing out. You're not going to go to these developers and be like, oh, also, by the way, we need all those games done. They're going to tell you to fucking pound sand. So it ends up launching. Kalinske has to try to put on a smile and be like, this thing is going to be revolutionary.
Kalinske says, $399. You can have a Sega Saturn today.
So in that Console Wars documentary, they have footage from that show.
I watched the footage.
Where the kid's like, this is awesome. I'm totally getting a Saturn. I thought I was going to get a PlayStation, but I'm asking my parents for a Saturn.
Yep.
And he's like, well, it's $399. And you see the kid's face just drop. Like, even he realizes that significance of like, oh, I'm not fucking getting this.
And he gets off stage. There's a fairly decent applause. You know, we just talked about a shock drop of a console. There's going to be a lot of applause. Mm-hmm. Ends up running into the guy that's there from KB Toys, the second biggest toy store in the country.
It was Toys R Us, my friend.
Toys R Us was number one, then probably KB Toys.
No. I think it was the dude from Toys R Us.
No, it was KB Toys.
It was KB Toys,
yeah.
Okay.
Comes up to him and he says, what are you doing? How is this going to work? We don't have these in stores. You're going to make us basically look like nincompoops because you just pushed all of this up. Mm-hmm. We're never going to sell a Saturn in a KB Toys ever.
That's an additional 4 months of not being able to create additional units to have enough in surplus. Didn't they have to tell... Kalinske, one of the biggest things that he did for Sega when the Genesis was on the rise is he got them into Walmart.
Everybody wants to be in Walmart. Everybody shops at Walmart.
And Nintendo had owned Walmart. This is kind of going back, but it's a cool little story. So what they end up doing to try to get in with Walmart is they go to Bentonville. They go and find a strip mall that's close to Walmart headquarters. And they basically put in a Sega store. But it's a place that you can just come in for free and play Sega. So you have all of these people coming in, kids of the people that work at Walmart, headquarters. You have some of like of course, if you're working there and you're like a person that tries to find products and you see this, you're going to I'll duck in here and take a look. They took every billboard in Benton and put Sega advertisements on it. And finally, I think the guy from Walmart called up Kalinske and he's like, enough's enough. You got 6 feet. And he gave them a 6-foot section. So he ends up getting them into Walmart. And because of the shit about pushing up the Saturn to an earlier release date, they don't have enough. And he has to go through the retailers. He's like, I got to tell Walmart and Target that you're not going to get the new Sega console.
We've boned developers.
Mm-hmm.
We've boned the supply chain retailers. This probably isn't good. This should be the worst thing that happens to him at E3 in 1995. It's not. Because
it doesn't take long.
No, when it comes time for PlayStation to have their moment in the sun, gentleman named Olaf Olafsson. Great name.
This dude was like a pioneer in like CD-ROM.
Yeah.
And like CD, what am I trying to say? Like CD readers and stuff.
Works for Sony.
Yeah.
Pretty big deal. Olaf Olafsson gets up. He gives this, I believe it was a 20-minute speech. I watched 8 minutes of it to get to this point in time.
He's basically he's like the, in Grandma's Boy, except he's not as bad as this guy. He's like this guy for Sony and PlayStation.
A little bit. He's certainly a robot.
He's much smoother.
He says, with the permission from the higher ups at Sony, we would like to bring Steve Race up to talk about the price of PlayStation.
He's supposed to give a big speech.
Steve Race walks up with a very large stack of papers in his hand. He gets up on the podium. He shuffles them. He sets them down. He leans forward into the mic to start his remarks. He says, $299.
And this is for the PS2. This is when they're announcing this.
No, this is PlayStation.
No, this is PS2, buddy. PlayStation launched before that.
I think you're off.
Am I?
PS2 launches with Dreamcast.
Oh, you're right.
So this is the original PlayStation.
Too many fucking systems, man. Game over, man. Sorry.
$299. Picks up his papers, walks off stage. Crowd goes bananas.
I think they said that he was planning on he had a speech written about everything, and he had heard like 15, 20 minutes before them say the price of the Saturn. He's just like, yep.
We're going to get down to brass tacks.
That's all you need to say. For any parent, even on the fence about buying that, or for a kid trying to save up money, $100 is light years.
Well, not to mention, as we were talking about with the time difference that the developers were pissed about and the supply chain is pissed about, a consumer is willing to wait another 5 months and spend another $100 less and buy it on September 9th or September 2nd. No, September 9th. Yeah, when it comes out.
Because that was close to the original date that the Saturn was supposed to come out.
September, right? It was September 2nd.
So you get a head start on them.
You're right around there. And I'm sure at this point, Kalinski's heart just drops as soon as he hears that because he knows he's been beaten already. Throughout this whole entire thing, we have the backstory of in Japan, both of these systems have already released. Mm-hmm. And during that time in Japan, Sony would drop their price, forcing Saturn to drop their price. Sony dropped their price, forcing Saturn to drop their price. So Kalinske knew that this was in the PlayStation playbook, that this was going to happen. He just didn't know that they weren't going to incrementally drop the price, and their MSRP coming straight off the line was already going to be dropped to basically what it was in Japan.
I think one of the big advantages that PlayStation had as well is because they had refined the process of making the PlayStation, and as manufacturing the PlayStation went along, it became cheaper and cheaper. So the longer they produced it, the cheaper the cost per PlayStation was actually to produce.
Well, yeah, Kutaragi also knew because when Saturn dropped, they brought one back to the PlayStation or to Sony. Mm-hmm. They open it up, they see that there's 4 processors in there.
Yeah.
And when you see 4 processors, that means that the means of manufacturing is going to be very complicated. Mm-hmm. Sony had 1 processor in there. So if you can refine what you're doing and continue to drop the price and still make money, Saturn can't drop the price and still make as much money because they have something that's harder to configure.
What it all boils down to is this. The PlayStation sold more units in its first 2 days after release than the Sega Saturn did in 5 months. So whatever time frame ahead that the Sega did, Sony made up for that in the first 2 days.
2 days.
2 days.
And it just goes to show that when you do have units on hand, they're going to sell. Mm-hmm. When you're trying to sell something that doesn't have any units on hand, even if there's a market there that wants it and you've done well in Japan, so in theory you should do okay in North America, it doesn't happen if they're not there to sell.
Yeah, I feel bad for Kalinske because he knew he was just being handed a dud. And that's not even the end for Sega. No. It's not like, hey, we're done after that.
And this whole idea with Saturn is they've kind of figured out something pretty cool. They had a game called Virtua Fighter, and this was an arcade game.
It was so popular.
Very cool game. I remember playing it. It was great. The graphics that were used were 3D polygons. So something that hadn't ever been seen in this home arena yet as far as graphics for the game.
Think of like a rougher looking like Dance Dance Revolution type characters in the arcade.
That's very good actually. Sony sales end up getting helped out because all of these things that Sega was fighting in the arcade industry, all of these developers are suddenly kind of cool with working with Sony. They see how good Sony is and how strong it is, and Sony says, hey, imagine what your games would look like with this.
Mm-hmm.
And so you start to get all of these different partnerships with Namco.
This is our first one.
Yeah.
Think of what we can do after we learn from this.
We do good with this partnership. It just gets better. So Namco partnership opens them up because it's putting arcade titles against the Sega titles. So you actually have games that are coming out for this new system that are going to be something that's already a known quantity. Sony goes ahead and takes a shot at the Sega arcade business by providing, basically it was raw PlayStation hardware for this Namco 16 or this Namco 11 that's going into all of their arcade boards. Mm-hmm. So now all of Namco's arcade games have the graphics that PlayStation has created, and it just keeps getting better and better.
Guess what, kids? You can play this at home.
Yep. And in exchange for that partnership, Tekken goes ahead and comes on and says,
fuck, I love Tekken.
This is what we're going to do. Namco tells them, you guys like Tekken? It's going to be in the arcade.
Eddie Gordo.
It's going to sit in the arcade. You can play the game, but we're producing this with Sony. You can play this in your home soon enough. Mm-hmm. Sega now has to go up. They have to throw their Virtua Fighter, which is their kind of bell cow with the Saturn because there were so few games.
Yeah.
Now it's going up against Tekken. I thought Virtua Fighter was kind of cool. Tekken's 10 times cooler.
Tekken is awesome.
It was fantastic.
The dude that was like the robot, like Yoshimoto Yoshi. Oh, fuck. What was his name?
I haven't played Tekken probably since the PlayStation.
Is one of my buddies played with Eddie Gordo. He was like the dance fighter.
Uh-huh.
And it was one of those things where you could do the same move over and over and you could never fight against it. The most annoying fucking thing anyone could ever do in a fighting game. But he would just do the same move and there was no way to defend it. And it would just sweep your legs out from under you all the time. I still have good memories of that game.
Yeah, Tekken was a lot of fun, but it challenges this 3D polygon, these graphics that Saturn...
had a fighter with a goddamn Jaguar head, man. Virtual Fighter didn't have that. This also does lead to that thing that I'm trying to think of, like, kind of how to phrase it, where you would see that in certain more Japanese leaning games that a woman's armor wasn't really sufficient enough to cover her extremely large breasts and everything.
Breastplate was a little small.
Yeah. There was a lot of just blatant sexualization of these characters. And listen, I'm not going to say that I didn't enjoy it. I'm not going to say that.
So May 11th, 1995 is when Sega drops a Saturn. September 9th is when the PlayStation comes out. October 2nd, 1995, Sega has to reduce their price down to $299 to match PlayStation. That was how fast it happened for them, was they were like, oh shit, we're not selling that well. PlayStation caught up to us in 2 days. And at that point, I mean, that's right there. You've already seen that they've beaten you in 2 days.
I gotta imagine because you know when the fucking release date is for it. I gotta imagine that if you can see your sales over the 4 months before, and you're coming to August, you're like, we're not selling these things, and we're a month away from the PlayStation dropping. You would drop your price then and being like, oh, I can get the Saturn now because it's cheaper and I'm still getting it before the PlayStation. How do you not do that?
Yeah, and even to do it like the day before the launch of PlayStation or something like that.
You have to wait to see how big the dick that's going in your butt is before you're actually like, oh, lower the price.
Yeah, just an odd move. Yeah. And to get back to your blatant sexualization, I never found Harrison Ford very attractive as Indiana Jones. There was a woman who entered my life that was an Indiana Jones type figure in Lara Croft. And all of a sudden, Sony ends up...
I'm going to bring a tear to my eye.
I don't remember the developer that they went to.
I think it was Square Enix.
And
I want to say Square Enix did Tomb Raider for... God, the fucking nerd knowledge in here is insane. Tomb Raider was awesome. Tomb Raider is she is the female Indiana, but she's a mix between Indiana Jones and James Bond. Poor Angelina Jolie been all weird.
Except for bigger tits.
Well, here's the thing, dude. Yes. Okay.
You don't gotta justify it. It's okay.
I'm not. I'm gonna give you what I imagine was the sales pitch for this game. Okay, so we have an adventurer, an explorer, tombs, puzzles, enemies, gunfire, all that. They're like, that's Indiana Jones. They're like, no, we're gonna make her a woman. They're like, boo, and they're like, with huge knockers and short shorts. They're like, yay. It's going to be a sexy Indiana Jones. She's going to go ahead and solve puzzles and save the world and everything. We're going to do it for like 5 different games. The first game, it's going to make her boobs look like a milk carton, but people are still going to move and pan the camera around at certain angles to try to see them.
Do you think every iteration of Tomb Raider that they did, they're like, yeah, I don't know.
There was a development team, a couple guys that were responsible for just boob development. I'm confident of that.
You got to think when they're talking about doing another one of them, like doing Tomb Raider 2 or 3, and they're like, I don't know if we want to do this. I know it sold really well, but is it going to sell really well again? They're like, hey, graphics are better. Tits are going to look good. Yeah. And all of a sudden, like, rubber stamp, get it out, make it happen.
Have you seen the new motion engine for movement of body parts?
Tomb Raider was huge. There's so many titles for PlayStation that came out in that first iteration. We're talking about GTA 1 and 2, where it's just a bird's eye view of what's going on the streets. And you're seeing all of these new crazy graphics at that point in time that we look at now, and phones have better graphics. Like, it's not even close.
I know, but the PlayStation is still, it's only 32 bits.
Yeah.
And it's just, I mean, like, one of the games, it's so crazy that like people would have different games, but everyone had like certain niche games that were always like near and dear. There was a game I had called Jet Moto that was basically like hovering like crotch rockets. And it was fucking fun as shit. And then I don't even know how many hours I played going head to head with buddies in Gran Turismo. And the graphics in Gran Turismo for the PS1, at that point you're like, is that reflection off of the car? It was insane. And it even did the replays where it would take it into different camera angles. It was the craziest thing you'd ever seen.
Was Turismo an arcade game first?
I don't know if it was.
It seems like it was too good for that first iteration. This was my transition point.
Congratulations.
I was fine. I know, I'm coming out. 8 years old, trying to get baptized in the Mormon church. 8 years old, you throw on a white jumpsuit, you go into a font with an older man, or I think you can do a woman now, maybe, I don't know.
Is a font a fountain?
Yeah, it's like a big bathtub.
Okay.
Everybody dresses in all white. You get baptized for your sins. You plug your nose. They
all
grab
that you've done up until the age of 8.
Yep, everything is washed away.
I'm sorry for hiding my shitty underpants in the corner of my toy chest.
I feel like they could have expanded it out to like 13, 15, something like that.
Like, this will cover you for the next like 5 to 10 years. Yeah,
but they grab you by the wrist. It's holding your nose.
I think baptisms are kind of like the process of the baptism once you're in the water is pretty universal.
Yeah, I don't know.
A lot of people dunking you like face first.
Like they do in the river.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think they do that with babies. Don't they dump them in face first or do they sprinkle them? I don't know. But anyway, I am not quite sure if I want to do this baptism thing.
Is this going somewhere?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Not quite sure I want to do this baptism thing. 8th birthday comes and goes. Adam's not baptized. Don't know what's going on.
Oh, you have to agree to it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not. This is
not like circumcision.
No, you have to make the choice. Okay. And I'm pretty out on this idea. My dad says...
There's only one thing that can bring you back.
Yeah. My dad says, do you remember that PlayStation that your mom takes you to Hastings to rent? Because this is in a time period where if you didn't have it, you would go to a place called Hastings, which was like Blockbuster. I think Hastings is out of business everywhere for sure, right? You would go rent an actual console that would come in a black plastic briefcase, and you would take it home, and you would play it.
Had to be the greatest feeling in the world.
It was the greatest night ever. When my brother and I would go, we would always make sure we went in pairs because Mom would have to buy each of us something. Mm-hmm. So I'd go get a wrestling tape, and he would get either the game console or a game if we had the system. It was a beautiful partnership that we had working out.
Everyone knew their roles.
Yep. Yeah, we got to watch a wrestling VHS. We got to play whatever game it was. My dad goes, I'll buy you a PlayStation if you get baptized. And immediately I was like, I've seen the light. take me in, throw me in the font. I don't give a shit what you do. Get me that PlayStation so that way we don't have to rent
puddle around here?
Yeah, we can do it here.
Yeah.
And that was my switch from Nintendo to PlayStation.
I love the fact that your baptism has a very definite monetary
$2.99.
Yeah.
$2.99 is all it took. Every other kid that went in there was a putz. They didn't think about trying to bargain their way into a baptism. I had the financial wherewithal to say this is going to cost somebody something.
I just see the guy lowering you down and you close your eyes.
It was my dad.
But it goes into your mind and it's just you sitting in front of a glowing screen as you go underwater.
I had to get dunked twice because the first time I don't know if it didn't take or they said that I broke the water. And so my dad lifts me back up. And again, at 8 years old, I'm the size of a 15, 16-year-old.
Yeah.
So I think at 8 years old, I was probably 5'7", maybe. Dad's 6 foot tall. We're almost the same size in this font. My dad's like, we got to dunk him again. He breached. I got to do this again.
Wait,
I got to dunk him, bring him back down.
Like you didn't get all the way under.
Yeah, you got to go all the way under. Everything's got to go under.
You still got, if you don't, you keep the sin on that little piece of skin that doesn't go into there and then it spreads to the rest of you.
So I got to say that 2 baptisms is by far and away worth something that just set me up for the rest of my life. I've been a PlayStation man, diehard since then. Maybe it was the Lord's intervention that brought me to PlayStation and I've never let up.
All I'm thinking in my head is that scene from Inglourious Basterds. He's like, do you take Udovich? You take that deal? He's like, I take that deal. He's like, so would I. Damn good deal.
So it worked out, man. PlayStation was such a big deal that it almost, I'm not going to say it scared Nintendo out of the 32-bit race, but at the same time, Nintendo never entered the 32-bit race.
Nope.
So there has to be something there to it.
They got to be in development of something.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're not going to just, sit on their thumbs. I think probably this ends up coming out. They see what it does, and they're just like, let's just keep working on this and making it better.
Yeah.
We'll meet them a couple years down the road, but we'll also blow them out of the water when this thing's finally going to come out, and then they'll be behind us.
Let's pivot. We've seen that 32-bit is possible. Let's jump to 64. July 16th of that same, May 1996 at E3, Sony drops their price to $199. The next day, Sega has to match the price of $199. At that point in time, in 1996, July 16th, Kalinski's just kind of fed up. He's had enough with Sega. Sega's had enough with him.
It's one of those times when stuff that you'd actively, if you would have been allowed to do it, would have completely turned it around.
Yeah.
And you saw yourself stonewalled. You were just like, I know exactly whose fault this is, and I know that I can do nothing to fix it. So I'm going to peace out.
You guys rip my heart out. I don't know what he does. Excuse me after that.
He went and started working for, I think, remember Leapfrog? That did like the education
learning
tablets?
pads.
I think he was working for Leapfrog.
Oh, okay. Kind of odd with some of the marketing strategies he used for Sega to go to Leapfrog, but nonetheless still works.
Hey, let's not forget that Sony rented out hooker rooms as an early business venture.
No, Nintendo.
Yeah. Oh,
Not
sorry.
Sony.
Yeah.
Don't use Sony's name.
Hold on.
Sony was using the
You're
1
telling
hour
me that
hotel
Sony
rooms.
has never bought into the hotel and hospitality game, and nobody's ever used those rooms for sex with a prostitute?
No, Cars, GTA.
Okay.
That's what they did.
Okay.
This is when things get real bleak for Sega, and this is kind of where the writing on the walls are. 1997 E3, the new executive vice president of Sega of America announces that the Saturn is not our future. This is 1997. They dropped the Sega Saturn in 1995. 2 years, the guy comes out and he says the Saturn is not our future. If that's not giving up on a system that fast, I don't know what is.
And they also shit the bed because when they were in that development period with the Saturn, they were like, okay, we're going to have to, because we've wasted time trying to do this Sega CD and 32X, we now have to actually, to get the Saturn rolled out, we have to pull support away from the Genesis. And that was something that, despite it still being a really good seller in America, they just told Kalinske that. They were like, yeah, we're ceasing support for the Genesis to focus everything on the Saturn. He's like, it's still selling.
Yeah. Yeah, and the numbers weren't great, but they certainly weren't awful.
They were more than they would have made had they not stopped supporting it and ended up making the Saturn. But
yeah. So for Sony's first iteration, Within the first year, from 1995 to 1996, they captured more than 20% of the market. That's a pretty good capture rate for your first year of a new system.
Yes.
Just the fact that they were able to do that, and they're chipping away mostly at Sega's business, but at the same time, Nintendo is losing ground and they're not in the race. So like, it's a little bit of a shot to Nintendo where I think they have to kind of start to step up their game. And they do, because Nintendo comes out the first shot of the 64-bit war with the N64.
Was that at the same E3?
September 29th, 1996. So that would have been the year before.
Okay.
That Saturn said it wasn't. So they see that Sony's kicking their ass. Now they see that Nintendo's dropped to 64-bit. Like, what do we do now? This definitely isn't our future.
I got a special place in my heart for the N64.
I do too.
I think the N64 might be all around the most fun console. And I think that that's probably because, was that the first 4-player? Yeah.
I think
was
it
Saturn?
was.
I can't remember. I don't think it was.
There might have been 4 ports on the front of a Saturn, but I just don't remember. I haven't seen one in so long.
I mix it up with the Dreamcast sometimes when I'm thinking about it.
Dreamcast is 4 ports.
Yeah. N64, 4 ports, all of a sudden 4 of you playing fucking Mario Kart. The controller was different. And that's one big thing that the PlayStation revolutionized. That was a whole thing about design of the controller that had to go up to like the president of Sony to actually approve that. And he's like, I like it. It's different. It looks Sony, like the handlebar style.
Please tell me you're going to give me the story about how it got its size.
Oh yeah, it got its size because the dude that was from Sony of America,
Ken, the godfather of the PlayStation.
Yeah, he was like, hey, American hands are bigger than Japanese hands. This thing's really small. We're going to need to make it bigger. And the guy that designed it, that was in charge of the PS, Kudaraga, he was like, no, we're not making it small. He'd already gotten overridden because he didn't even want the controller and he was forced to do it by the president. And so he's already pissed about that. But he's like, no, I'm not making it bigger. And he's like, listen, Kutaraga's like, listen, I'll arm wrestle you for it. If I beat you, then it's over. And if you say no and you refuse to do it, then we're not talking about it anymore. And the guy's like, okay. He ends up beating him. And he's like, make it 10% bigger. And so that's where we get the size of the first PlayStation remote. But with the release of that N64, like, that's a very unique controller.
Worst controller ever.
Are you serious?
It's got 3 prongs.
Yeah, but
it's a where am I supposed to put my feet situation. Which one do I hold on to? How do I make this all work? I have to hold the outsides for the D-pad.
In every single game, the middle portion with the joystick goes in your right hand. You control the D-pad and everything, and your thumb can reach up and touch the other things. I think the only reason they have that other thing there was because some people also play opposite and are more dominant with their left hand, so they had to have something to hang on to reach those buttons. Because the buttons kind of did the same thing, because remember the yellow buttons were the up, down, left, right? They're up in that little corner. I think you could switch it to do the same functions. Listen, I'm not trying to sell you on an N64. I'm just telling you, an extremely enjoyable console. The fact that I still like playing that now.
Yeah.
That's a game I will probably buy an N64 as soon as my kid gets a little bit more dexterous as far as the hand-eye and the movement and speed, just because I will want to kick the shit out of him in Mario Kart and just establish long-term dominance. And then one day he beats me on Rainbow Road and I look at him, a single tear rolls down my cheek, and I just hug him. He's like, what's the matter, Dad? And I was like, nothing. Nothing's the matter.
No, then you pull out GoldenEye, and you just start smoking him in GoldenEye.
And that's exactly what you see. You just hear the sound of a cartridge being pulled out, a cartridge being pulled in, and then you hear, dun 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 dun. He's like, what's this? And I'm like, strap in.
Yeah. And that was just what?
No odd jobs.
Yeah, you can't be throwing the hat.
No, and he's too short.
It's unfair. You can't shoot. Yeah. There wasn't a crouch, was there?
I know there also, I think, was.
So he gets even smaller than that. N64 was huge. One of the games that I remember that sticks out the most was Star Fox. Star Fox was wild back then.
Star Fox written right here, buddy. Star Fox was insane. The graphics on it. Now you look at them, you're like, oh my God, everything is just, it looks
Awful.
like pixelated.
Yep.
It looks like the screen.
Play Minecraft.
But yeah, but the way you're looking at it at that point and the movement and the 3 dimensions of flight and everything, it was crazy. And it had a cast of anthropomorphic animals that were like fighter pilots.
Huge back then. So September 9th, 1996, $199 price point. Very good, I would say, for the systems that were coming out, especially considering that, what was it? It was $399 for a Saturn.
Well, it came in and matched them immediately because at that time, wasn't the Saturn down to $199 by that point?
Yeah, everybody
was still
dropped.
$199. And Nintendo was like, we don't need to charge more. Let's just come right into the game with a better console or a more advanced console and do that.
Smartly enough, intelligently enough, they pushed the release so all of their developers can have a lineup of titles to play immediately.
I think this right here is where you get the biggest deviation. The way that the N64 is designed, it's more kiddie, like Nintendo has always done. But I think at that point, this was their last chance with this system to kind of enter more of that adult market that makes so much money now with Xbox and PlayStation. If they were going to do it, they were either going to do it with this console.
Yeah.
And even with GoldenEye being a shooter and all that kind of stuff, it was so tied to Mario. And then, we didn't even mention Donkey Kong Country when it came out on the Super Nintendo. That's when I got my Super Nintendo package with Donkey Kong. So I got it later
right there
in the run, but I remember getting that from Walmart and being so like, I wanted it so bad. My dad's like, I got to run into Walmart and grab something real quick. And he comes out and he's holding the box and hands it to me in the back seat. And I think it was probably a lot like those fucking crazy videos on Christmas where the kid just screams at the top of their lungs and it can shatter glass. And I just started freaking out.
You start doing karate moves and screaming. Like if you got
drive faster. But yeah, that came out on the Super Nintendo, but Mario, Super Smash Brothers.
Yeah.
Super Smash Bros. Was on N64. They stayed in their lane, and Sony at that point was just like, we're going to handle the rest of these people. And guess what? We think the market is just going to get older, and you guys just go ahead and stay back there.
We're going to go ahead and talk about how Nintendo-fied GoldenEye.
Oh, how did it do it?
Nintendo goes to the developers of GoldenEye and says, hey, we're not really big on the whole killing thing. You guys are doing a lot of shooting. Is there any way, like after a level's over or anything like that, everybody that was shot is shown alive again? And this fellow's like, what? Like, yeah, we just don't. Everybody gets killed. These headshots are pretty nasty. We got to get this figured out. Is there anything that you can do? Like, we'll figure out something.
He's like, yeah, you know what? Yeah, follow me. There's something we can do. Walks him into a room with the TV and sits him down and puts in the movie GoldenEye. And he's like, watch this. The movie gets over. He's like, did any of those people get up?
No.
He's like, no. He's like, yeah, it's based on James Bond. James Bond is not the guy that's like, I'm going to tranquilizer dart everyone.
So the end scene in the game of GoldenEye is everybody alive again.
No, it's not.
Uh-huh.
No.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean everyone's alive again?
Like the end credits, it shows everybody that was killed alive again.
You kill so many people in that game.
Like the big characters.
Oh, so it's not just the nameless Russian soldiers
No,
like at the dam
those
and everything.
Guys they might as well be.
Oh, it's the dude that like constantly tried to kill James Bond and everything like that. And he's like, hey, I'm kidding. I'm fine.
Just back again. And it's just that Nintendo touch where we have to push us towards children. But 64 is as far as it goes. I mean, the wrestling games that came out, NWO versus WCW Revenge, all of those were pretty brutal games. There was a lot of different stuff going on.
Chair smashing tables, going through tables.
Not tables at that point. There were chairs. Sting's baseball bat, obviously.
Trash cans?
I'm not remembering trash cans.
I don't expect you to remember the one game from N64.
But it was just such a wild time. And I will say, best friend had a 64 every night that we had a sleepover. Didn't even have to bring the PlayStation because it was just going to be N64.
You remember the purple one? That was kind of the opaque purple.
Yeah, and you could see through to the guts of the controller. Yeah. They did it with the system too, huh?
Yeah.
It was almost like a clear. I want to say they had a black one that was kind of opaque too.
I think so.
just the way that they did it, and to not even talk about the design of the N64, how it just kind of fits like that mid 90s look.
It was the cartridge that you saw on top. It wasn't like the the regular NES where you put it in, close the door. Super Nintendo, you put the cartridge in. There is something so satisfying. I mean, it's frustrating, but then it's satisfying. You put the cartridge in, it doesn't work. Pop it out, and then you have to open the little door. It's the first thing most people fingered was the door of an SNES when you had to pop that thing down, blow in there a little bit, pop it back in, the game goes on. Same thing. It's a nostalgic feeling when you take that cartridge out, but that does end up being kind of a disadvantage in the long run for the 64 is because it doesn't have that additional storage because it's still cartridge based.
Final Fantasy ends up
huge.
Walking away from Nintendo because it was Final Fantasy VII, I believe, which is nuts that there were 6 other Final Fantasies that they had done before this
it was
time.
Like GTA, it's top down. Not much of a fantasy.
Final Fantasy shows up and they say, hey, you guys are going cartridge again. We need a longer form. We have a story that we want to tell. This is our game that we want told correctly. Nintendo says we're sticking with cartridges. There was another Japanese title. I don't remember what it was, but they were kind of along the same lines. And they said, well, how are we going to be able to tell this story without a disc? And Nintendo goes, I don't know what to tell you. They say, okay, well, we're going to go to Sony. And I don't know if it was hubris. I don't know if it was just overconfidence. Nintendo lets Final Fantasy walk away. And I think everything after that came out on PlayStation, didn't it?
That's a huge franchise.
Huge
That's why they
franchise.
keep making the games.
It's those little things to where Nintendo wanted to stick to what they knew and didn't want to kind of enter this space with anybody else. That I can't say it was bad, though, because 64 was sweet. It was awesome.
And no, it sold a ton. As far as like in comparison to the Saturn and everything.
Rumble packs.
Oh, yeah, where you collect them into the bottom of the controller and everything.
We're also in the phase, I think Sony was the first one for Saturn might have had it too, but memory cards.
Yeah.
You were able to save your spot in the game.
Sony had it in the PS1, I think, because you slid them in right above the port for the controller. Yeah.
So you're able to save the spot that you were and have a continuation of that story.
Please make something easier to lose. That tiny 2-inch by whatever it was, thin little card.
Yeah. And you have Mario hitting 64. Everybody goes nuts. It's a great thing to have.
He's familiar. An old friend.
You have PlayStation.
An Italian, designed by a Japanese man, voiced by a crazy dude in California, right?
Yep. You have this situation where flagship is Sega, Sonic, flagship of Nintendo, Mario, the man we're just talking about. PlayStation doesn't quite have a flagship. Till Crash Bandicoot comes along.
Bandicoot.
Same thing.
Bandicoot.
I had it. He was. The game was cool to me for like the first 2 or 3 hours that I played it. Kind of crapped out on it, but he was the flagship, and I think he actually had a fairly decent run. He didn't have as many titles after the first one,
but he was even more of that. Like he's even more like anti-establishment than Sonic is, and everything. He's got more attitude. Look at him. Is he even wearing a shirt? He had that like skater vibe.
You also have Spyro the Dragon. So they're dipping their toes into Nintendo's market with more of a child-driven game. The whole thing is just so interesting as to how it all kind of comes about, where you have this 3-team race, but Saturn has dropped off so hard. They're already not the future, that a 64-bit system is kicking the hell out of a 32-bit PlayStation, but they're still kind of neck and neck.
Well, Sega, it's a slow death.
Yeah.
They're still designing another system. It's their last gasp. 2001, the Dreamcast comes out. I remember hearing about the Dreamcast and everything.
Yeah, we forgot. Lifetime sales for the Nintendo 64, 32.9 million. Pretty damn good.
Yeah.
Pretty good, just based upon everything else that's going on in the market. They still have the lion's share of the market. Sega got depleted by Sony. They've dropped off with the Saturn. N64 comes in. They regain their majority market share. Just a crazy kind of way to get into it. Yeah, and then we'll go right back into Sega's last swing. And this one probably makes me sadder than anything about this.
Oh, okay. So it was 2001 that they got out of the console business, but it was 99 when the Dreamcast actually was released. 13 months ahead, has a head start of 13 months on the PS2 and the GameCube. Was it 26 months?
Yeah. And then there was
rumors,
maybe a dark horse.
Rumors,
maybe somebody coming up on the horizon.
Or was it Dark Man aboard a pale horse?
So they have the jump. Sega Dreamcast comes out September 9th, 1999 in North America. And I have a very soft spot in my heart. I'm not quite sure how the timing lines up because I know that I had a PS2, but I had a Dreamcast at the same time. And they kind of came out, obviously, very similar times, about a year apart. I love the Dreamcast. The controller worked just fine. It was perfect.
Was that the one that had a little recessed or a little open area?
Yeah, it had the open window, and then it had it was just back to 2, or I guess they were always 2.
Yeah.
But they were almost like vertical, so you could wrap your fingers around the back of it. They had the triggers up top, then you had the buttons. And everything just sort of fit right. It was a great system. There were pretty good titles. Crazy enough, it had the Ethernet port on it.
Yeah.
So
that was something that they kind of foresaw.
It could go online. The Sega Dreamcast was a hell of a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. But they get this head start, and you got to think, we got to put some numbers up. We got to put some cash back in our pockets. They've decimated the arcade business for us. They've absolutely smoked us because it's just drying up because they're bringing the arcade.
No one's going. No one goes to who wants to travel and pay a quarter.
Well, and the other arcade developers have followed Sony.
Yeah.
So they're now in the home too. So now we have to, figure something out.
I think what kind of ends up happening is, and this is going to be a big part of part 2 as well, is the trust of the consumer in regards to these systems. If you fuck up one time and you mess up to where it costs somebody not only the money for the console itself, but that time and the enjoyment that they don't get out of it because it's not as good as they think it should be or as good as something else that their friends have.
Yeah.
That's when they're going to move on to another. Like console fans are either insanely loyal, but they can also be fickle if they get scorned by whoever they're using and go to somebody else. And I think after the Saturn and that kind of whole debacle, with all the other options available, the Dreamcast already had, it was already, it had a disadvantage from the start. Mm-hmm. It was 10 steps behind the others from the starting line and just never had anything positive enough about it to ever have a chance.
No, had a great World Series baseball game, but it just didn't have enough going for it.
One thing that Dreamcast that still has a bearing on gaming today that contributed, that was the launch of the 2K Sports franchise.
Okay.
It was on the Dreamcast.
Huh.
Yep.
So it was 2K Studios.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a pretty big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't stop anything for the Dreamcast, unfortunately. Glad that they kept going. March 31st, 2001, Dreamcast is discontinued. Sega pulls its hat out of this console ring and restructures into a third-party game developer.
We're getting out of hardware. We're going soft.
Over the lifetime, which, again, wasn't that long, we're talking 2-ish years, 9.13 million units sold. Just not enough to really keep them in the game. They launched it
at 199, so at least they learned their lesson in trying to be comparable there.
Yeah.
But yeah, everyone else was just so far ahead of the curve and kind of already had their fan bases built up and had,
Sony marketing was great.
Yeah.
Nintendo is the old name that just can't quit producing things.
And
they were almost knocked out. They didn't put anything into the 32-bit race, but they came so hard in the 64 that there was really nothing else that Sega could do.
And in part 2, we're going to find out if they can survive another console throwing its hat in the old ring.
We're down to 2.
Yeah.
But are we really down to 2?
We're not. Tune in next time to find out. But really, do you have anything else?
No, I'm ready for part 2.
All right. Well, look for that within the coming weeks. We're not going back to back to give everyone a break, but round 2 of the console wars will be coming soon. Later.
Peace.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us for another episode. If you like what you heard, hit that subscribe and like button. Follow us. If you didn't like what you heard, still hit that anyway, because we'll probably cover something in the future that you do like. Please follow us on our social media. Adam, hit him with it.
Our Instagram is Historically High Pod, Historically High POD, and we are on Twitter at Historically High. That's Historically HI.
All right. And if you guys want to send in any feedback, suggestions, hit us up on those two, or you can even do it on Gmail. It's historicallyhighpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again.
Peace.